2 whole years after the global phenomenon that was Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2, we are finally entering the final build-up to the release of Season 3, otherwise known
as the Culling Games. Due to Jujutsu Kaisen reaching the never-before-seen peaks of Gojo vs Sukuna, and then the almighty lows of the finale, an unfortunate situation arose where the Culling Games arc became slightly overshadowed, at least a lot more than it should have. Nothing else in Jujutsu Kaisen compares to Gojo vs Sukuna, which is an incredibly impressive achievement, but also a hindrance to the rest of the series at the same time. The arc leading up to that fight was inevitably pushed to the back of everybody's minds, which was then made worse by the lackluster finale, leaving a bad taste in everyone's mouth. As a Jujutsu Kaisen content creator and someone who still has a genuine passion and love for the entire series to this day, I have decided to shine a light on what I think is one of shonen manga's most underrated arcs, the Culling Games. Therefore, over the next few weeks, I will be releasing in-depth analysis videos of each Culling Games fight and exploring why this arc not only acts as an incredible build-up for what's to come, but also why it is a beautifully executed arc all on its own. So, if you are beginning to once again feel the hype of Jujutsu Kaisen building and are excited for Season 3, then be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, check out the membership options, and then sit tight for my deep dive analysis of the Culling Games' first major fight, Yuji Itadori vs Higuruma Hiromi. Let's go. First of all, let's very briefly jog everyone's memories up until the events of Yuji vs Higuruma. The immense scale of the Shibuya incident and the sealing of Satoru Gojo inevitably led to immediate panic within Jujutsu society. Therefore, every sorcerer who had found themselves either aligned with Gojo or in Gojo's favor ended up coming together and forming the main Jujutsu Kaisen cast that we follow up until the end of the series. This included the return of the 2 remaining special grade sorcerers, Yuta Akotsu and Yuki Tsukumo, in addition to the recruitment of pseudo special grade Kinji Hakari. After establishing that Kenjaku wishes to hunt down and capture Tengen for a deadly merger, Yuki and Chozo decide to remain with Tengen, while the rest of the group split up to achieve a series of objectives. Firstly, one or more of them must accumulate 100 Culling Game points to add a rule allowing the transfer of points between players, with the hope that it will eliminate the need to kill others and solve the problem of inactive players being exposed to technique removal, otherwise known as death. Secondly, they wish to convince other players to give them their points to add another rule allowing the substitution of a current player with a new player, which will allow them to save Megumi's sister Sumaki Fushiguro. Now, please keep in mind that the first objective of adding a rule allowing the transfer of points stems from Yuji's innate reluctance to kill. Players like Megumi, Yuta, and Hakari would likely kill other participating sorcerers without hesitation if that's what they judge needed to be done. Yuji's inner conflict with the idea of killing, though, actually stems from his good nature, his grandfather's death, his rivalry with Mahito, and the recent burden of guilt that Sukuna forced upon him when he laid waste to Shibuya. Keep that in mind because it is a very important theme within the Higuruma fight. After recruiting Hakari, Megumi and Yuji enter Tokyo Colony No. 2 as players and then are forcefully split up. Fortunately for them, Hajime Kashimo used his 100 points to create a rule allowing information on other players, including their name, colony, and point value, to be shared with the rest. And after seeing this, Hakari went to deal with Kashimo personally because he managed to figure out that he was the strongest, while Yuji and Megumi then went to locate the only other sorcerer with 100 points who had not yet created a rule, Higuruma Hiromi. Now, after beating some fodder and meeting an old school friend who had awakened as a grade 5 sorcerer, Yuji finally found Higuruma's base of operation and entered all alone. Having 102 points, Yuji knew that it meant Higuruma was capable of killing at least 20 sorcerers all alone, and yet he chose to push forward anyway. The first time that Yuji Itadori and Higuruma Hiromi officially meet is when we get that iconic panel of Higuruma in a bathtub, fully clothed, in the middle of a theater. Introductions is something Gege Akutami massively excels at, and I don't think it really gets much better than this introduction, because the page does just immediately captivate you. Higuruma claims that he is trying things he wouldn't usually do, like bathing with his clothes on, making crappy jokes, and pretending to be the money-grubbing lawyer for a change. Pay attention to that last point though, because it is very crucial to understanding Higuruma's character moving forward. Now, Yuji determines that Higuruma might just create the transfer rule willingly, since he hasn't actually created a rule himself so far, and because he is an awakened sorcerer, not a potentially evil incarnated one like Sukuna. However, Higuruma rejects it for a very interesting reason. Being completely ignorant of the Culling Game's true purpose, Higuruma then wishes to see the Culling Game actually continue because it's something completely new. To Higuruma, it is a whole new way of society functioning, which operates around a set of absolute rules instead of operating around the whims of their country's traditional laws and legal system that are created and enforced by corruptible and biased people. He admits that it has faults and is probably a bit too brutal, but he is curious to see how society functions when faced with rules that will indiscriminately punish those who break them with absolute justice. Now, just before I dive deep into the analysis of both Yuji and Higuruma's characters during this fight, I did want to draw your attention to Gege's phenomenal artwork over the course of these chapters. The paneling, the double spreads, and the way he makes all three characters so emotive in their facial expressions is just unreal, and I think it probably peaks during this fight. Anyway, let's move on to the real analysis, which I reckon will blow your mind once you can put it all together. Now, in the build-up to and across the duration of this fight, Higuruma Hiromi was given multiple backstory chapters, which were so well written that he quickly became a fan favorite in the manga. And I suspect the same will be the case when Season 3 reveals this character for the very first time. As a modern-day sorcerer who awakened a curse technique, Higuruma experienced a sudden change in how he saw the world, in the same way that Yuji did upon discovering the world of sorcery. The themes that I find are best explored in Higuruma's character, though, are those of burdens which sorcerers must carry. Not only the burdens of guilt and responsibility, but also the burden of strength, talent, and intelligence, which is often explored in Jujutsu Kaisen as a whole. There is also a great parallel to Yuji, where we can see the clear difference between a new Jujutsu sorcerer who had someone to guide them and a new Jujutsu sorcerer who didn't. Yuji had Gojo to help him adjust to the world of sorcery, whereas Higuruma was completely alone, at least until his confrontation with Yuji Itadori. Higuruma was a gloomy defense attorney in Japan who was generally considered a genius by all he worked with. He had a knack for taking impossible or unwinnable cases, which he claimed was because it kept him sharp and that easy cases would dull the mind. And as much as I do think there was definitely some truth to this, when we see him take the case of a young man accused of murder, we then begin to see that there's actually more to Higuruma's motives. On the surface, the boy is blatantly guilty. He was found with the murder weapon and claimed that he had it because he intended to take it to the police. Yeah, not a likely story, right? He's obviously guilty. But the kid insisted he was innocent, which is when we begin to see Higuruma's doubt in the legal system's ability to deliver real justice. Initially, it was not because Higuruma necessarily believed the boy, but it was because he was able to acknowledge the unlikely possibility that he was telling the truth, and that the legal system was now responsible for determining if that is the case or not. This possibility pushed Higuruma to take the case and look deeper into it, which is when he found more and more evidence suggesting that the boy truly was innocent. Long story short, the poor and vulnerable boy's workplace didn't actually allow employees to make calls to emergency services because it would disrupt the neighbors, which is why he then wanted to take the weapon to the police directly. He was also seen on CCTV cameras in a store at the estimated time of death. With this information, slowly but surely Higuruma did start to truly believe he was innocent and put a very solid case together. After an initially successful trial, a retrial was called, and because of no new evidence being provided, in addition to no other suspects being presented, the court ruled a potentially innocent man guilty and sentenced him to death. Sorry, hi, I'm making this in the edit. I kind of lied. I said death. for dramatic effect, but I'm realizing now by what I put on screen that he was just sentenced to life in prison. I mean, it's pretty much the same as I've fully killed the immersion here, haven't I? I'm sorry, continue.
Okay.
This is when Higuruma saw the flaw in their system. It all came down to money, influence, and power, of which Higuruma did not have enough of to actually force another trial. That was until his brain was adjusted to allow for the use of curse techniques thanks to Kenjaku's actions in Shibuya. After that moment, the genius lawyer known as Higuruma Hiromi awakened the power he needed to deliver what he thought to be absolute and complete justice. However, his actions were more so driven by emotion and rage as he straight up killed the judge and the prosecutor's attorney. Now, Gege made sure to emphasize that a normal, money-hungry, ambitious, and greedy man would not end up in the position that Higuruma found himself in. A man like that would not take such a case, and he would not be able to see the possibility of the boy's complete innocence in the first place. But Higuruma was burdened with intelligence and talent, a curse that let him see things the way they are, and it effectively depressed him. Talent and genius is a curse in Jujutsu Kaisen, even though it manifests in different ways. Gojo is cursed by it, Yuta is cursed by it, Sukuna is cursed by it, Megumi is supposedly cursed by it, and now Higuruma is too. All of the characters that have these themes of depression and isolation, however they might manifest, all have the common factor of having this natural talent and intelligence. When you come to see this theme in Higuruma's character, it just makes it hit that much harder later on when Higuruma is stated to have potential rivaling that of Satoru Gojo. There is a direct parallel there. And just like Gojo, Higuruma sees the truth of the world, but has no real influence over the traditional, corrupt, and greedy higher-ups that sit at the top of their respective societies. Unlike Gojo, however, who chose the path of nurturing the next generation, Higuruma followed Gojo's alternative plan and killed said higher-ups. The curse of that knowledge and the ability to see things how they truly are is a depressing way to live that can lead you down a much darker path if you don't have anyone there to guide you. Higuruma was alone, and he became a killer. Geto was alone, and he became a killer. Sukuna was alone, and he became a killer. Yuta was not alone, and he became a prodigy who would help change their society for the better. Do you see the difference? Being the honored one though, Gojo was the exception to the rule of isolation, leading you down a dark and evil path. He witnessed what loneliness can do to someone firsthand when Geto defected, and Gojo then deliberately rejected that path, choosing instead to nurture and cultivate real change in the world. Unlike Geto and Sukuna though, it's not too late for Higuruma. He could still reject that darker path just as Gojo did if he just had someone there to guide him. And after only a few weeks of being a sorcerer, Higuruma's guide would appear, and he would save Higuruma from that path in the same way that Satoru Gojo had done for so many others, including for the man in question. That man, of course, being Yuji Itadori. As Gege amazingly shows in this fight, Yuji was slowly becoming a guide for others long before Gojo even expressed his desire for Yuji to be the one to carry on his dream. It's truly a beautiful piece of writing that does end up going full circle, so congratulations Gege, it's really just incredible. Let's put the themes aside for a moment though, because I also want to analyze the fight itself and why I think it's one of the most entertaining fights in the series, despite not being a typical powerhouse battle. I've already glazed Gege's drawing ability enough, so I won't get into that too much, but what I do think Gege really excelled at across the entirety of the Culling Games arc is the choice of matchups. The Culling Games is similar to a tournament arc, but instead of it being a series of 1v1s which can get very repetitive and predictable, Gege designed it in a way that allows for complete unpredictability and a massive variety of different ability interactions at completely different skill levels. Gege's genius strategy for making this tournament arc immune from becoming repetitive was not only by making it a free-for-all, but also by carefully designing the perfect opponent and matchup for each of the Jujutsu High sorcerers. This aspect of the Culling Games, I think, has gone very criminally underrated. You will only realize how perfect the matchups are when you try to think about how things would have gone if Yuji, Maki, Yuta, and Hakari had actually gone to different colonies. In this case, Yuji ended up facing Higuruma, someone who had only recently discovered sorcery just like Yuji. But it goes much deeper than that, because it is definitely no coincidence that the very first proper fight Yuji has following the brutal events of the Shibuya incident is against a man of the law, who wields the Judgment Curse technique. This interaction is how Yuji confronts the guilt that has been eating him up ever since Shibuya. Now, Higuruma's natural genius and talent allowed him to actually reverse engineer the basics of cursed energy and cursed energy reinforcement from his newly manifested curse technique. A technique that, much like Hakari's, comes with a ready-made but non-lethal domain expansion. Higuruma summons a terrifying Shikigami called Judgment and expands a domain called Deadly Sentencing, which takes the form of a courtroom. As Yuji soon comes to learn, all violence within the courtroom is forbidden. The accused is placed on a stand and is presented with a crime that they are then accused of committing by the Judgment Shikigami. The Shikigami knows absolutely everything about you and everything it needs to know for the case, including evidence that will be held against you in the future. However, neither Higuruma nor the accused know what is actually inside of the evidence slip until the accused makes a confession or denies the crime. And therefore, when accused of any crime that they have committed in their lifetime, they have three options. They can confess, deny, or stay silent, with each one having benefits or drawbacks completely dependent on what the evidence slip says. Gege makes the genius decision of actually starting off with something light-hearted and insignificant by making Judgment accuse Yuji of going to a pachinko parlor while underage. It's a very minor crime, it's not that big of a deal. Yuji kind of stresses about it a bit, but then attempts to claim that he is innocent, knowing full well that he's actually guilty, by saying that he just wanted to use the bathroom. But unfortunately, the evidence slip showed Yuji at the cash register, meaning that he is found guilty. What would normally happen is the domain would close and the accused cursed technique is then confiscated, which in itself makes cursed energy temporarily harder to control. However, since Yuji has no technique in the first place, his entire stock of cursed energy was confiscated instead, meaning he had nothing but raw hands left over. And this is where you really begin to see why it is such a perfect matchup, because if there is one sorcerer who could still throw hands despite having no access to cursed energy, it is Yuji Itadori. While attacking Yuji relentlessly with his shape-changing gavel, Higuruma seems to realize that Yuji is no ordinary person and that his raw strength is simply terrifying. Before locking in and stomping Yuji though, our main character has a genius idea and calls for a retrial, which immediately forces the domain back open and applies the no violence rule. Now, remember what I said about Gege making the first crime light-hearted and unserious as a little warm-up? Yeah, well that kind of comes back around here because the next accusation causes the entire tone of the fight to take a massive shift. Judgment accuses Yuji Itadori of mass murder in Shibuya on October 31st. With no filler in between, Gege then drops one of the most impactful and dark panels of Yuji Itadori in the entirety of the story. With a perfectly straight face and absolutely no hesitation, Yuji simply says, "Yeah, I did that. I'm not lying and I won't deny it." Not only does this moment shift the entire tone in a much darker direction for the reader, but it's also the first time that we truly get to see how Yuji feels about what happened there since his mental breakdown. The lack of hesitation and immediate bluntness make it very clear that he takes full responsibility for what happened and genuinely believes it was his fault in some way. Yuji Itadori feels like he killed those people himself, and it's been eating him up from the inside all this time. Which again is why this is the perfect matchup to put Yuji in following Shibuya in order to really communicate Yuji's feelings of guilt to us. The way this moment stands in stark contrast to the first lighthearted and unserious accusation also just makes it hit that much harder. It really is very well written. Not only does this build on Yuji's character though, but it lends massive development to Higuruma at the same time, which then in turn leads to the progression of the main plot when Higuruma eventually makes the rule that Yuji requested, but more on that in a second. So after confessing to the crime, Judgment looks absolutely enraged in one of the best panels I think Gege has ever drawn. The Shikigami then hands out the most extreme sentence possible: death. A sword of pure light then forms in Higuruma's hands, and it is a sword capable of killing anybody it cuts without exception. A sword he would then ruthlessly swing at Yuji as a punishment for his crimes. Higuruma's initial reaction is to just carry out justice and kill Yuji for what he did in Shibuya. The longer Higuruma worked as a defense lawyer, the more he began to see both the accused and the prosecutors as weak and ugly, until he was so consumed by this feeling that he felt that way towards everybody, including Yuji Itadori. Higuruma saw that humans have flaws, he saw that they are ugly, he saw that they have unique weaknesses that other animals do not have, and he began to despise them for it. And he felt this exact same way about Yuji Itadori. At least that was until some new information was revealed to him. After a short time, Higuruma finds out the contents of the evidence slip provided by Judgment. It wasn't revealed straight away because Yuji pleaded guilty, but after learning the information inside, Higuruma's entire perspective shifted. After learning that Yuji pleaded guilty to a crime he did not commit but felt genuinely responsible for, Higuruma remembered that he actually used to value the flaws and weaknesses unique to humans because it also allowed for other uniquely beautiful things like redemption, justice, and empathy. He was reminded of exactly why he became a lawyer in the first place. In other words, Yuji saved Higuruma from going down that dark, lonely, and cursed path simply by being a genuinely pure and good human being, which in itself shows that Yuji is a human, not a curse, and that he is not guilty of the crimes an evil like Sukuna commits. Therefore, he expels the sword, creates the transfer rule for Yuji, and quietly exits, saying that he will ponder his actions and eventually turn himself into the authorities when the Culling Games ends. In conclusion, Yuji vs Higuruma is the perfect opening fight for the Culling Games. Not only do we get our first glimpse of how Gege meticulously designed each Culling Games matchup to create the perfect dynamic between each party involved, but we also get to experience beautiful character writing, a deeper exploration of Jujutsu Kaisen's themes, along with loads of hype moments, cool artwork, and raw aura. All of those factors come together to create a truly beautiful story which allowed Jujutsu Kaisen to reach the heights that it did. However, Yuji vs Higuruma is not the only fight in the Culling Games that is this well executed and well written. Almost every major fight in the arc is just as good for the exact same reasons, without becoming repetitive or stale. Jujutsu Kaisen's Culling Games arc is brutal. Way more brutal than Shibuya. Yuji vs Higuruma was just a warm-up. It was Yuji Itadori's brief moment to shine before Gege put him to the side in preparation for a merciless and all-out war between the strongest sorcerers of today and the strongest sorcerers in history. Megumi Fushiguro, Yuta Akotsu, Kinji Hakari, Maki Zenin, and Yuki Tsukumo. All of them are absolute monsters, 4 of whom were personally trained by the strongest sorcerer of the modern age, Satoru Gojo. And unlike Yuji Itadori, none of them will hesitate to put anybody who opposes them 6 feet under in the blink of an eye, as strongly demonstrated by the fight that comes directly after Yuji and Higuruma's, which is of course Megumi Fushiguro versus Reggie Star. Megumi's lackluster ending spoiled its character for many people, myself included, but there is no denying that his generational performance in the Culling Games will result in him just low-key running Season 3 when it finally airs. So as always, like the video, subscribe to the channel, check out the membership options, and let's get straight into why Megumi Fushiguro will actually just run Jujutsu Kaisen Season 3. From the second Megumi entered Tokyo Colony number 2 and was split up from Yuji, he made it very clear to the readers that he was just not messing around. Grade 5 bum Remy tried and failed in seducing Megumi in order to lure him to Reggie Star's base. Well, I guess she did succeed in luring him there, but only because she said that Higuruma was there and not because he was fooled by her false charms. Megumi is not there to mess around. He hasn't got time to waste on sparing people the way that Yuji does. He makes it blatantly obvious from the get-go. If somebody gets in his way, no matter who they are or how flirtatious they get, he will strike them down without a second thought if need be. Fortunately, he actually stands on business and doesn't shy away from a single opponent he faces, even when he finds himself in a 1 versus 4 against Reggie and his goons, which I can't lie was just crazy aura. One of the most underrated and forgotten things about this fight is just the crazy amount of aura farming that actually gets done, and I'll be honest, it's mostly by Megumi. I'll get into this idea a bit more later, but from the second he confronts Reggie, Megumi starts channeling his inner Aizen, and he stays that way for the rest of the fight. It's very cool. I mean, Remy should have been way more scared of even being near Megumi, because the gap in their strength was so big that she practically poops herself once he reveals his power and Reggie compliments him for being so strong. So strong that Reggie actually then tries to recruit him, but obviously Megumi has other plans. Yeah, even after seeing Reggie take down Divine Dog in a single attack, the same Divine Dog that was tearing up Hanami, by the way, he still wanted the smoke with Reggie and his whole gang. The second Megumi rejected Reggie's offer, one of his allies tried to sneak Megumi Toji style, but before anyone had a chance to process what happened, Megumi dipped into his shadow and then straight up threw the sorcerer right over the edge of the balcony like he's in Cobra Kai. I mean, bro clearly learned how to aura farm from the best of the best, because he even finishes this move off with a reverse tact and not a shred of remorse. Tacto. After beating this supposedly fodder sorcerer though, Megumi freezes for a split second and sees an eyeball fall from one of the floors above him. We then get to see Gege's incredible ability to introduce new characters yet again, as the eyeball just straight up explodes, and one of Jujutsu Kaisen's most criminally underrated sorcerers of all time then enters the battle, Iori Hazanoki. After Megumi narrowly avoids the blast, Reggie and Hazanoki then just kind of sit there and act all nonchalant for a bit while Remy does her best Tanjiro impression. Honestly though, Remy can cry and beg for sympathy all she wants, because Megumi simply does not care and pretty much just tells her to get a job and grow up. The grade 9 sorcerer that Megumi threw off the balcony then turns back up, thinking, well, he's gonna do something, but little did he know, he probably chose the worst possible time to pull a stunt like this, because before either of them could make a move, Kogane appears to declare that a new rule was added to the Culling Games, a rule allowing the transfer of points between players. And that is when, for the first time since the end of Jujutsu Kaisen Season 1, we see Megumi Fushiguro smile. He smiles knowing that his friend Yuji Itadori had successfully subdued Hiromi Higuruma. That rule is all Megumi needed to be able to save his sister Sumaki. As far as he was concerned, that was his end goal, which means he no longer needs any of these sorcerer's points. It means he no longer needs to hold back and save their lives, which is something he makes abundantly clear when he immediately locks the hell in and decimates the fodder sorcerer. And when I say decimate, like I mean it. Bro lands a clean Uruma Washigiri to the face, blasts him out of the building with Nue, and delivers a brutal finishing blow with his sword. And with that, Megumi Fushiguro was awarded his first 5 points in the Culling Games. His mission was complete. Anyone who tried to challenge Megumi from this point onwards would be facing off against his full strength, which, despite popular belief, is a hell of a lot more than anything he had to show us in Season 1 or even Season 2. When I say he channels his inner Aizen, I really mean it, in more ways than one, because it's not just the aura farming. Megumi was a step ahead of Reggie throughout the entire fight, and as I will cover much more deeply in just a second, he even has an awesome "it was all part of my plan" moment in the climax of the battle. The entire Tokyo Colony fight was a testament to how much Megumi has reflected on himself and grown as a sorcerer ever since getting that lecture from Gojo about believing in his own ability to win. It's also a testament to his overly cautious and skeptical nature. Like, seriously, this dude doubts everything and everyone. I mean, he low-key strikes me as the kind of guy to use the link at the top of this video's description to get up to 72% off on NordVPN. Okay, guilty, you got me. Channel is now supported by... Hey, don't even think about commenting on the outfit, alright? I'm nearly homeless at this point. Yeah, I'm now supported by NordVPN, which means you can go to the link at the top of the description right now for 72% off and an Amazon gift card. 72%! I'm a personal user of the product, have been for many years, so I genuinely feel comfortable promoting it. It's a great way to stay safe online, there are so many threats out there, and it's also great for just exploring and streaming your favorite anime and shows from anywhere in the world. Good way of supporting me, make me look a little bit less homeless. Go check that out now. I'm gonna get back to the video before my retention gets the Gojo treatment. As I was saying, Megumi's growth and development as a sorcerer is explored the most during his Culling Games fight against incarnated sorcerer Reggie Star, but for some reason it kind of just all goes under the radar and I'm not really sure. Well, actually, okay, I do know why. It's because the ending of Jujutsu Kaisen decided to butcher Megumi's entire character, which of course completely overshadowed literally everything else Megumi ever does in the whole series. And that's why I want you to forget about Megumi's conclusion and focus solely on his growth, his individual growth as a sorcerer during this fight against Reggie specifically. I'm not gonna go into Takaba versus Hazanoki too much during this video, despite that fight also happening at the same time, because it doesn't really serve any purpose other than to just bring Hazanoki away from Megumi's 1v1. But I do just have to very quickly point out that anyone who previously thought Takaba was not a violent combatant was dead wrong. I went back and reread this whole fight for the video, and like, god damn, bro was putting the moves on Hazanoki. I mean, he even hit him with the Kakashi special. Anyway, back to the fatherless bum versus the old age pensioner. From the very first time Megumi saw Reggie summon kitchen knives, he had already worked out what his technique was: contract recreation. It allows Reggie to bring anything on his receipts into reality and issue them one command like you would a Shikigami. Now, knowing this, Megumi's first move was to actually use Max Elephant's water to make the receipts all wet and unusable. You know when you get like your paper wet, or like you spill water on something you're writing and it goes all like mushy and... Oh, I don't need to explain this to you, you smart people. Kind of. Anyway, not only is the entire interaction a huge testament to Megumi's genius and battle IQ, but it also highlights his growth in skill, since he manifested Max Elephant alongside other Shikigami at the same time, which is something he was not previously able to do due to how much cursed energy that Max Elephant takes up. Unlike us readers, who also kind of just decided Reggie is a bum because of how goofy he looks and how nonsensical his technique is, Megumi actually did acknowledge Reggie for his strength and vice versa, which I've got to admit kind of shocked me a bit because I also thought they were both just grade 2 bums, but after really, deeping it and rereading this fight, Reggie is just a very strong opponent with some insane cursed oh damn, way to kill the mood. Yeah, Megumi actually did acknowledge Reggie for his... No, that's the wrong sentence. Oh, I'm properly losing it, goddamn. Sorry. Reggie is a very strong opponent with insane cursed energy basics and a nasty technique. He can literally bring anything into reality provided that he has a receipt for it. It's a highly versatile and very unpredictable technique, made even more scary when you learn that Reggie can issue a command which controls the manifested object's behavior. The fact that Megumi actually won this fight is low-key very impressive. I think we have collectively gotten used to clowning on this fight because of Megumi's conclusion and because of Reggie's dumb JoJo's-like design. But honestly, it's my only criticism of the fight. I think the only problem with it is that Reggie should have looked a lot more threatening than he was. A goofy-looking opponent like him conflicts a little bit too much with Megumi's dark and grueling aura. The actual method of combat which Gege chose for these two, though, makes everything worth it, because I forgot how unbelievably hyped some of the moments between these two were, and I honestly think it is going to be an at least top 3 fight in Jujutsu Kaisen Season 3. I mean, sure, they throw hands conventionally a little bit early on, and at some point Megumi gets Reggie's manky foot slammed into his face. But the moment Megumi unleashes his trump card, no, not that trump card, from the moment Megumi unleashes his other trump card, the battle becomes 10 times cooler. After luring Reggie into a sports hall, Megumi then unleashes his domain expansion. As soon as those two words escape from Megumi's mouth, you can see Reggie quite literally poo himself. He is simply in awe that Megumi is on that level, a detail which I really appreciated because it often goes overlooked just how rare having a domain is and how much skill it actually takes. The problem with domains in JJK is similar to the Bankai problem in Bleach. Once the story reaches a certain point, you mainly focus on the strongest characters in the series, most of which will have a Bankai or domain respectively. This creates the illusion that having a domain or a Bankai is much more common than it actually is, but to a high grade 1 level sorcerer like Reggie Star, achieving such heights seems almost impossible. Being from the past, Reggie pulls out a hollow wicker basket, but soon realizes that it was a waste of time and cursed energy, since Megumi's domain is incomplete and has not got a sure hit. It doesn't matter in the slightest though, because the insane heights that a domain can boost a technique like Megumi's to is nearly as dangerous as a sure hit itself. There are also a bunch of references to other manga in this fight too, which I think is very cool. First of all, there are multiple shadow clones that just batter Reggie to a pulp. We then get told that Megumi's shadows are like a liquid which Reggie must reinforce his feet with cursed energy with in order to stand on, just like in Naruto and with chakra. And then finally, there is Gege Gege's chosen method of combat for the rest of the fight. It becomes a battle of pure spiritual pressure alone. Okay, not literally, but the effect is close enough because Reggie soon realizes that Megumi must actually bear the weight of anything in his shadow, and since his entire domain is the shadow, he starts to overload it with weight, starting with 3 whole cars weighing in at 2.4 tons. In an amazingly awesome panel, we see Megumi collapse under the pressure, or at least it looks like he does, but Gege then reveals it's a deliberate decision by Megumi to distribute his weight and prevent blood from pooling in his feet, once again exercising his monumental battle IQ. Bro then locks in and drops a whole-ass 3 to 6 ton elephant on Reggie, who shatters his leg, but surprisingly has actually managed to catch it and hold it up. And this is what I mean by an awesome battle. They're just piling weight onto each other to see who can last the longest. That is before Reggie reveals his trump card, and a whole-ass 30-ton house comes crashing through the ceiling. Like I've been saying from the very beginning though, Megumi has just been a step ahead this entire fight. Right before the house even hit them, he grabbed onto Reggie. The house then caused them all to crash through the floor and into the sports center swimming pool, which was waiting below them, exactly as Megumi had planned when he entered the building. He held Reggie underwater until all of his receipts were soaking wet, and until Megumi could buy as much time as possible in order for his burnt out technique to replenish. And due to the weight from all the cars bearing down on both of them, Reggie had no hope of resurfacing without expelling his cars from Megumi's shadows, who had also expelled his domain expansion. When they finally both resurfaced, Reggie acknowledged that Megumi had been a step ahead of him for quite a while now. He outwardly claimed that it was now a hand-to-hand fight where neither of them can use their abilities, but secretly Reggie did believe that Megumi could still summon any Shikigami other than the dog that he killed earlier. But you see, this is where Reggie properly messed up, and it's why I said Megumi was really in his Eisenbag for this entire fight, because ultimately Reggie was just still wrong. Megumi was not a step ahead of Reggie at all. He had been 2 steps ahead of Reggie since the very second that they had met. So in one final strike, Divine Dog, which Megumi had been saving all the way since the beginning of the fight, returned from its nap and laid Reggie down to rest for good. The insanely underrated art, the paneling, the methods of combat used by Gege throughout this fight, these things are the main reason why I think this fight will blow up the internet when Jujutsu Kaisen Season 3 eventually drops. There really aren't as many fights in the series as gritty and inventive as this one, plus the anime-onlys actually like Megumi a lot more than the manga readers do, for some, obvious reasons, so I think it will be huge. However, hype moments and aura is not the main reason why I like this fight. I like this fight because it is one of the only moments in the entire manga where we actually see some solid growth and development from Megumi. Before this, if Megumi faced an opponent stronger than him, he would not hesitate to simply give up his life to summon Maharaga and call it a draw. But after Gojo's pep talk about how Megumi should fight to win even when he can't necessarily see a way forward, he started to reflect on himself and try to work towards that. We see it against the second finger bearer, where Megumi initially wants to summon Maharaga but decides instead to heed Gojo's words and create his own path to victory, which led to the creation of his domain expansion. In this fight against Reggie though, there is no hesitation at all. He never doubts himself or even thinks about summoning Maharaga for even a second when faced with a potential 1v4 against Reggie and his squad. That is because Megumi actually utilized his genius IQ, he utilized his technique properly, and he utilized his experience, all to create a path to victory from the very beginning of the fight. The reason why this full circle development of Megumi's mindset goes so underappreciated though, is because he instantly regresses the moment that Sukuna rears his ugly head later on. Okay, sure, I understand that trying to instantly summon Maharaga again later on is a great way to show just how terrifying Sukuna is, but it really does hurt Megumi's personal journey at the same time, which is made even worse when you look at his ending. The upsetting thing about Megumi is that his development was ultimately completely inconsequential. It had no purpose, it leads nowhere. There was no final payoff, it just happened passively. And that's the reason why no one acknowledges it and everyone forgets it. It just wasn't relevant. Despite not being my favorite fight though, Megumi versus Reggie in isolation was insanely well executed and definitely a hidden gem yet to be uncovered by Season 3 of the Jujutsu Kaisen anime adaptation. Which of course means the next fight I am going to cover in this series is the big one. The one which will carry the Jujutsu Kaisen anime and my glazing abilities to completely new heights. It is of course Yuta Okotsu's generational generational run in Sendai Colony. Gojo vs the Disaster Curses, Yuji vs Chozo, Toji vs Dagon, Mahito vs Yuji. These are some of the highest level fights ever seen in Season 2 of the Jujutsu Kaisen anime. Sukuna vs Mahoraga was the first real on-screen showcase of an all-out battle between two genuine special grade level threats though. Nothing before or after that comes even remotely close to that level of power and destruction, at least not in the anime. Not even Yuji vs Higuruma and Megumi vs Reggie at the start of the Culling Games comes close to that level of sorcery combat. However, everything drastically changed when the narrator suddenly shifted our focus away from Tokyo and towards what he claimed to be the Culling Games' most dangerous and vicious battlefield yet. I am of course talking about Sendai Colony. Sendai took the Jujutsu Kaisen manga to a whole new level with one of the best executed free-for-all fights in recent times. The massive destructive power of the participants, the huge variation in abilities and character design, as well as the unholy amount of aura farming that gets done between them, leads to Sendai Colony being a top 5 fight in Jujutsu Kaisen. At least in my opinion, I feel that way. It's also my opinion that Sendai Colony will easily be the highlight of Jujutsu Kaisen Season 3, being contested probably only by Yuki vs Kenjaku, I'd say. Many will probably say Hakari vs Kashimo, and whereas I do think it's an incredible fight, I believe Sendai will translate better into an anime adaptation due to its much larger scale. So on that mildly provoking note, allow me to begin my complete analysis of Yuta Okkotsu vs Sendai Colony and explore why I think this fight is a perfect shonen battle that is soon to also be a perfect anime battle. Let's go. Now you see, the sorcerers in Sendai Colony were so broken that before long only 4 players were left standing. 4 players so absurdly strong that they were each given their own introduction page, which I obviously decided to add a little bit more flavor to. Name: Dhruv Lakdawala. Points: 91. Time period: pre-Heian era. Classification: special grade sorcerer. Abilities: orbiting Shikigami that create a deadly domain over an area. Notable information: single-handedly conquered the archipelago in the Civil War of Wa nearly 2,000 years ago. Name: Ryu Ishigori. Points: 77. Time period: Edo era. Classification: special grade sorcerer. Abilities: Cursed Energy Discharge. Notable information: has the highest cursed energy output of all Culling Games players. Holds the record for highest recorded output in history. Name: Takako Uro. Points: 70. Time period: Heian era. Classification: special grade sorcerer. Abilities: Sky Manipulation. Notable information: former captain of the Sun, Moon and Star Squad, an elite group of assassins associated with the Fujiwara clan. Name: Kurorushi. Points: 54. Time period: modern age. Classification: special grade cursed spirit. Abilities: Cockroach Swarm, Festering Life Sword. Notable information: cursed spirit released from Kenjaku's control. God damn, I didn't realize I could sound like so much of a robot. Anyway, once Mappa reaches Sendai Colony, the Jujutsu Kaisen anime will probably experience its second ever taste of an all-out battle between real special grades. The Disaster Curses were presented as the most formidable and dangerous threats in the JJK anime so far, but when compared to the overwhelming power of sorcerers like those found in Sendai, the Disaster Curses suddenly seem like nothing more than a mere annoyance. These 4 players were such monsters that after wiping out the rest of the colony, they ended up stalemating in a situation that would famously become known as the 4-way deadlock. However, on November 12th, 11:28 AM, a new player entered the colony all alone, and the deadlock was broken. Name: Yuta Okkotsu. Points: 35. Time period: modern age. Classification: special grade sorcerer. Abilities: special grade vengeful spirit Rika Orimoto. Reverse curse technique: copy. Notable information: prodigy of the modern age, second only to Satoru Gojo. Yuta's entrance in Sendai Colony is actually just uncontested in this arc, because after the narrator spent an entire page gassing up Dhruv, Okkotsu simply walks in and low-diffs him off-screen. Well, at least it seems off-screen, but what a lot of people fail to notice is that way back in chapter 160, we do actually see a panel where Dhruv's Shikigami are being cut down by an unseen presence in the background. And you can even see the rough outline of a very Ryu Ishigori looking dude watching the events unfold. But either way, Yuta off-screening the sorcerer everyone else in the colony was too nervous to confront is an incredibly badass and effective way to start off a big arena battle like this one and establish Yuta as an opponent worth fearing. Being the kind soul that he is, Yuta chose to prioritize protecting the civilians trapped within Sendai at all costs, which means that he seeks to eliminate any player that threatens those lives. Druv was targeting civilians with his broad-ranged ability, so naturally Yuta decided he had to die first. But after Druv fell, an even greater foe emerged from the shadows. Kurorushi, the special grade cockroach curse. Before the fight begins, we actually get one of the most important chapters in the entire manga when it comes to foreshadowing future events, although for some reason it always just goes under the radar, because we see Yuta claim that he alone will earn 400 points, and that he alone will kill Kenjaku, and he says this on a panel that focuses very specifically on Yuta's left eye. Not only does this suggest the possibility of Yuta versus Kenjaku in the future, but it also foreshadows the events of chapter 261 and chapter 262. If you know, you know. A huge part of Yuta's writing actually revolves around his dynamic with Gojo, and Gojo's writing revolves around the theme of isolation brought about by his overwhelming strength, and just the idea that Jujutsu Society has failed in general and needs a revamp. The irony of this Yuta panel is that he claims to want to kill Kenjaku so that Gojo won't have to kill his best friend all over again, and yet he emphasizes that he wants to do it alone, which is the exact opposite of what Gojo would actually want for him. It's very similar to what he does in chapter 261, where he tries to bridge that emotional gap between himself and Gojo by stooping to Gojo's level and becoming a monster like him and not letting him go it alone, which is not really what Gojo wants. Gojo wants Yuta to be better than that. Ultimately, the decision Yuta makes both in this chapter and in chapter 261 is born from good and genuine intentions, but it is the wrong method. Also, this is where we start seeing Yuta's side of the left eye foreshadowing that matches Gojo's left eye foreshadowing. People really did like to ignore the fact that Gojo and Yuta shared the same left eye focus by Gege because they were just hell-bent on Gojo revival theories and agenda. And yes, I kind of realize I'm way off topic now, but it's important for the story. I'll move on anyway though before you start calling me a glazer. Who am I kidding, man? You're gonna call me a glazer anyway. Right then, Yuta versus Kurorushi is where we get to see not only just how insane Gege's battle artwork and choreography has become, but it's also the first time since JJK 0 that we see Yuta face a genuinely dangerous opponent. Normally in shonen, when doing a tournament-style arc like the Culling Games, the author will have the first fight be somewhat dominated by the hero in order to establish their strength and make their future challenges seem particularly tough. However, Gege went for a completely different method that I really do think ended up being extremely effective. Gege's goal in Sendai Colony was to make every single one of the opponents seem ridiculously strong compared to what we're used to, while also making Yuta seem just that little bit above them. Having Yuta low diff Kurorushi would only diminish Kurorushi's strength and not really push up Yuta's, and having Yuta extreme diff Kurorushi or even lose would obviously greatly diminish Yuta's strength. To combat this issue, Gege had Yuta actually send Rika away to protect the civilians in the stadium, meaning that it was base Rika-less Yuta versus a special grade curse. To further nerf Yuta, Gege also had Yuta realize he was being watched and therefore chose to deliberately hide his reverse curse technique, despite it being capable of one-shotting Kurorushi. I think the latter is actually great writing on Gege's part, because the very fact that Yuta was able to notice Ryu and Uro's presence mid-fight, and then conclude that he should hide an ace like RCT, massively contributes to what makes Yuta such a strong sorcerer in the first place. Because Yuta's entire thing as a sorcerer, even down to his curse technique, is all about his insane ability to analyze his opponent's every detail and apply what he sees to his fighting style mid-fight. After all, he is a prodigy, a natural genius, both of jujutsu and of strategy, which is demonstrated throughout the entire manga. We see this even more when Yuta's first order of business is disarming Kurorushi of his festering life sword. Just before doing this though, we see Yuta actually fire a huge blast of raw cursed energy from his sword, which then shreds through Kurorushi's cockroach swarm. We've already seen the likes of Gojo and Nanami discharging raw cursed energy, and so we know it is a generic ability. But the scale at which Yuta can do it with his sword is actually just insane compared to what we've seen so far. It's kind of ironic because it looks impressive at the time, but by the time you finish reading Sendai, it won't look like anything special at all. Now, at one point, Kurorushi uses an ability that surrounds Yuta in an ocean of cockroaches, but Yuta uses the exact same cursed energy discharge move to create a massive tornado of cursed energy and burn them all like he's Rengoku. And yes, I am literally only pointing this out because I think it is an incredibly underrated moment that just sort of goes unnoticed due to it being a textless panel in the middle of a fight that everyone kind of brushes past. This is why I can't wait for the anime to release so that everyone can actually see all of the criminally underrated and awesome details that Gege includes in his fights. Okay, I'm now gonna speedrun the rest of the Kurorushi fight because I'm not gonna lie, it does absolutely no favors for the Yuta agenda. So Yuta's shoulder gets cooked by Kuro's freaky sword and little cockroach babies start growing out of his body, which is like so yucky. Oh my god, it's gross. He then gets absolutely slugged by Kurorushi, and just when everyone thinks Yuta is done for, he gives up on holding back and actually uses his secret ace. And by that I mean he gave the curse a good old RCT snog to the lips and blows Kuro up from the inside. Okay, any questions? No, great, moving swiftly onwards. Seriously though, like how has Yuta kissed the same amount of cursed spirits as Hakari has won fights? Like what was Gege playing at? Why? After Yuta reveals his reverse curse technique and defeats Kurorushi, Takako Uro takes a chance to sneak Yuta and begin the big three-way battle that Sendai Colony is famous for. However, not only has the remainder of this fight got some of the craziest, most hype, most action-packed combat that we've seen in all of Jujutsu Kaisen, but also an incredible theme running through it that is mostly played out between Yuta and the Heian era sorceress known as Takako Uro. Gege's ability to consistently thread in these themes and amazing narrative points throughout a fight as fast-paced and action-heavy as this one is truly a testament to his writing ability, and it's what makes the Culling Games as a whole work so well as an arc in Jujutsu Kaisen. We get to see Yuta's genius and heavily analytical brain incorporated into his battles once again when Uro starts putting hands on him with her sky manipulating technique. I mean, he doesn't even flinch when taking an elbow to the face and being blasted into a crater of concrete. Instead, what he does is he just keeps analyzing her technique to figure out how it works and what its weaknesses are. And I guess this is also a testament to his crazy durability, but his physical stats get put to the test a lot more against Ryu Ishiguri later on. Now, after taking some hits, Yuta starts a dialogue with Uro, a dialogue that ends up frustrating her immensely. It seems that Uro was betrayed by someone who many people suspect was actually Kenjaku himself back in the Heian era, although that detail is just fan speculation. Yuta gives Uro a lecture about why going as far as to be revived by Kenjaku just so that you can do exactly what you did in your first life and seek self-gratification through endless violence is just incredibly sad. It's something Yuta just cannot understand because, unlike the monstrous sorcerers of the past, Yuta despises fighting and only does so to protect what really matters to him, his friends and his loved ones. That is why Yuta confronts Uro in the first place. He asks her if she had anybody that she loved, and throughout the entire fight, he really nails home the point that senseless violence will always leave you with this empty feeling of regret and isolation, no matter how much you try and pursue it. The theme of isolation, strength, and the idea of strong Jujutsu sorcerers being monsters that do nothing but seek self-gratification through conflict is a long-running theme throughout Jujutsu Kaisen, and it is most prevalent between Gojo and Sukuna. But Yuta Okkotsu represents the very change that Gojo aim to introduce into their society, where sorcerers diverge from the endless cycle of curses that breeds violence and conflict over and over again. Or should I say Yuta and Yuji mainly represent that theme. Yuji's side of that theme is best presented in his fights, and obviously, Yuta's side of that theme is best presented here in Sendai Colony, especially as he fights Uro in a battle of ideals as well as sorcery. Obviously, Yuta's sentiment irritates sorcerers like Uro and Ryu because he stands for the exact opposite of what they do, and yet he possesses strength that surpasses even their own. His fight with Uro is also when we learn that Yuta is potentially a descendant of the Fujiwara and Sugawara clans alike, making him an anomaly, potentially even more genetically blessed than Satoru Gojo. It's a real shame that Gege didn't explore this narrative more, because even the idea of Yuta and his themes of love and the curse of love being born from what would have been a forbidden love affair between two of history's most powerful sorcery clans is just such an interesting and fitting concept. I'm really upset it wasn't explored. The point I'm trying to make here is that, just like he did when placing Yuji against Higuruma, Gege has deliberately cultivated each matchup in the Culling Games to perfectly suit whichever whichever character we are currently following. Yuji's fight with Higuruma was a contest of morality where Yuji had to save Higuruma from going down the dark and lonely path that both Geto and Sukuna succumbed to. That key theme of gojo students breaking free from the endless cycle of violence, isolation, and tragedy. The endless cycle of violence, isolation, and tragedy. Yeah, that was woven throughout this fight, and it was great. Yuta's themes in Sendai Colony are much the same, which is significant because the old and new main characters of Yuta and Yuji are the two students most significant to Gojo in terms of carrying out his dream. The reason why it runs through both of them though is because both Yuji and Yuta represent completely different sides of that theme, where Yuji kind of follows in Gojo's path and Yuta kind of diverts a bit from where Gojo wants him to go and instead focuses on saving Gojo himself. That's not really what this video is about though. Although I do want to point out that Hakari's fight and Hakari's character also play into this theme in its own completely different way, which is exactly why the theme never goes stale, because every individual Jujutsu High student that Gojo is nurturing has a completely different way of portraying the theme. Gege's execution of the themes for each character's fight just differ so greatly, it's great. For example, Yuji's fight was a simple 1 versus 1 against a man from the modern age who needed saving from going down the wrong path, which is exactly what Gojo would do, right? In the modern age, Gojo is saving people like Yuta and Yuji and guiding them down the right path. And later on in the manga, Gojo reveals that he wants Yuji to carry on his dream and do exactly what he's been doing. Whereas Yuta, a character who is currently presented as the strongest of the new generation by a considerable margin, faced some of the strongest sorcerers of the past who had already fallen victim to the dark and lonely path. And what Yuta tries to do is save them from said path in the exact same way he will do for Gojo later on. At the end of the fight, Yuta even admits that it was actually a mistake to try and make Uro understand why she should value others instead. I mean, if she had realized what Yuta was saying to be true, it would have only, rubbed salt in the wound because, she's lived her life. It's too late. It would leave her with nothing but regrets. That is why Yuta gives up on it at some point and simply considers himself blessed. He considers himself blessed that he had Gojo to save him, the way that Yuji saved Higuruma, and he felt blessed to have people who love him and who he loves. What's impressive about how Gege wrote these themes though is that they are explored at the same time as a crazy, fast-paced and action-filled fight with a good balance between showing and telling. There's no need for any drawn-out flashbacks or extended dialogue that can break the momentum of the fight and the arc, because everything we need to know is actually woven perfectly into the fight itself. That is why Jujutsu Kaisen feels so fast-paced but has so much substance in terms of writing. Yuta also has a significantly different dynamic with Ryu Ishigori than he does with Uro, but I wanted to discuss his narrative with Uro in its entirety first before moving on to anything else, just for simplicity's sake so I don't have to go over it again and again. And since that's pretty much all there is to say in terms of the deeper writing aspects of this fight, I think we should move on to just glazing the actual battle itself. Okay then, as much as I love Uro and the fact that she's canonically naked for the entire fight, I've got to admit that when I first started reading Sendai, I found Yuta to just easily be the coolest one there. I mean, Druv was a burger and Kurorushi was just gross. What I really wasn't expecting though was to suddenly be introduced to someone who is now one of my all-time favorite Jujutsu characters ever. Someone who is genuinely in my top 10 both in terms of favorites and in terms of strength. I am of course talking about Ryu Ishigori, the absurdly strong sorcerer from the Edo era who boasts the highest cursed energy output among all Culling Games players. The reason I love him so much is mainly because of his ability, which I thought was so refreshingly simple after only, seeing weird and complex techniques for quite a while. You see, Ryu's entire thing is just firing massive beams of raw cursed energy, so strong that he can level entire city blocks, as shown when he interrupted Yuta and Uro's little debate. Obviously though, he's not as cool or as strong as Yuta, who literally takes a full granite blast to the face and walks away with only minor burns. This excites Ryu, whose entire character revolves around him wanting dessert for his life. He fought worthy opponents and found a good woman back in his old life, but he was still unsatisfied. He wanted dessert, he wanted that sweet aftertaste, and he believed that Yuta could be the sorcerer who would give it to him. After dodging some multi-directional beams, Yuta scales the roof and engages Ryu in close quarters combat. What is important to note here though is that due to his intense output, Ryu Ishigori's physical stats are far beyond that of your average sorcerer. His punches are so explosive impressive that they can send both Yuta and Rika flying several meters and crashing into buildings. His durability via cursed energy reinforcement is also so absurdly strong that he not only managed to tank close-range dismantles from 16-finger Megana, but Sukuna himself even stated that Ryu was equal to end-of-story Yuta and Yuji in durability. Imagine being so broken that you share physical stats with the final forms of both the story's main characters. Like, is that not insane? And even with his immense power, Ryu is actually still shocked by how durable Yuta is and says it feels like he's punching a giant water tank because of Yuta's sheer amount of cursed energy. The actual battle itself looks amazing, with explosions of cursed energy going off everywhere and great double spreads like the one of Ryu blasting Yuta off the roof. After doing this, Ryu then tries to off-guard Yuta with a granite blast, but Yuta simply blocks it with his bare hand and regenerates the damage with little to no effort. Although I do have to admit, Yuta genuinely does catch the short end of the stick here, because after he's blasted a granite blast, Uro pulls back up and thin ice breakers Yuta right back into the concrete. She then uses her sky manipulating ability to give us an amazing double spread of her throwing granite blast right back at Ryu, who tanks it but also glazes how hard it hits at the same time. Anyway, after Ryu gets back on his feet, both himself and Uro look towards Yuta and realize that they can finally see the bottom to his cursed energy. And unfortunately for him, it seems like Yuta just won't be the man to give Ryu his dessert after all. At least, that's what he thinks at first. Okay, before discussing the rest of the fight, I just wanted to take a second to really, show how broken Yuta Okkotsu is and why it's clear that Gege genuinely does intend for this man to be second to Gojo. Sendai Colony had 4 special grade level threats in a deadlock for weeks. The same day that Yuta pulled up, Druv was off-screened and Kurorushi was wasted by base Rikoless Yuta. Uro and Ryu then didn't give him a moment's rest, even after taking serious injuries from that special grade curse. But bro then tanked Kurorushi's attacks, killed him, healed up, tanked Uro's sneak attacks and Thin Icebreaker, all while analysing her technique, got blasted by Granite Blast, healed up again, got blown off a building and Thin Icebreakered into the ground, and then healed up again. And he did all of this in base without Rika and without his katana, which is literally his primary weapon as a sorcerer. Considering he already has sloppy control over his cursed energy, thinking about the insane amount needed to tank what he's been tanking and healing is still just insane. What makes him so terrifyingly scary though is that even now, when he has reached his limit in base, he can simply call Rika back and fully replenish his entire stock of cursed energy by starting his 5-minute connection to Rika. It's such a cheat code, it's like being 1 HP in Minecraft and then just switching it to creative. Replenished cursed energy is not all he gets from this though. During his 5-minute connection to Rika, 3 major things actually occur. 1. Yuta gains access to his copy curse technique. 2. Yuta gains access to Rika's entire supply of cursed energy. 3. Rika becomes fully manifested. When Hakari enters Jackpot, he gets 4 minutes and 11 seconds of unlimited cursed energy and automatic reverse curse technique. When entering his connection with Rika though, Yuta gains 5 minutes of unlimited cursed energy and the ability to endlessly perform manual RCT alongside a plethora of cursed techniques, a giant laser beam and of course Rika herself. Like, can someone please explain to me why everyone read this and decided Yuta versus Hakari was ever a debate? Oh, wait, no, I know why. It's because of that one accursed statement. The most cursed statement in the history of manga, probably. Also, before you all jump me in the comments, yes, I do know that Yuta's own cursed energy is not actually bottomless. However, the cursed energy he can access from Rika in his 5-minute window is genuinely unlimited. Oh, what's that? You want my source? It's right here in the official Jujutsu Kaisen databook. Page 135 explicitly states, a special grade vengeful spirit with limitless cursed energy that cannot be exercised, and Gojo says the same. Anyway, enough glaze, let's get back to the fight. So, Yuta starts replenishing his aura and takes an unnamed gauntlet tool from Rika, all while Uro and Ryu watch in shock as their hard work gets completely undone. But you see, that's exactly what is so great about this, is that Yuta held off on using his 5 minutes for a very specific reason. The very fact that it has a time limit means that he should only use it as a last resort when he's certain it will pay off. Before this point, he spent his time analysing his opponent's techniques, their strengths and their weaknesses, in order to make the perfect strategy and then execute it with Rika when the time comes. That time is now because Yuta immediately catches Uro off guard with a "don't move" from cursed speech and then pummels her senseless alongside Rika. Ryu tries to interrupt, but Rika effortlessly swipes away his granite blast and punches Ryu so hard that it sends him flying across the rooftops. Surprisingly though, Ryu actually claps back so damn hard that he blasts Rika across the street and sent her crashing into a building, which is low-key a crazy feat. While Ryu and Rika continue to run their ones, Yuta catches Uro off guard yet again by revealing that he had in fact copied Druv's Shikigami technique earlier that day. He then uses the mini Rika Shikigami to trap Uro in an inviolable barrier and slice her up with cursed energy. However, she still tanks it and responds with a thin icebreaker that shatters Yuta's gauntlet. My personal theory here is that the gauntlet is actually a copy of Miguel's cursed technique, because it boasts enough power to absorb the entire blow of a thin icebreaker without Yuta sustaining any damage himself. But it would be nice if Gege just, told us these things every once in a while. I'm sure it wouldn't kill him. Now, Ryu has decided that he has had enough of their lovers' quarrel, so he finally reveals his trump card. Uro and Yuta then sense Ryu's spark and respond by revealing that they too have been saving the exact same trump card. We are then blessed with not only one of the most badass double spread panels in the entire fight, but one of the most iconic manga panels in the entirety of Jujutsu Kaisen. I am of course talking about Sendai Colony's three-way domain clash and the reveal that special grade sorcerer Yuta Okkotsu has mastered such an ability at an even younger age than Satoru Gojo did. In true Gege fashion though, we don't actually get to see any of these domains because Kurorushi's demon spawn had finally finished growing into a fully fledged monster and invaded the three-way clash, leading to all of the barriers failing. Still though, the fact that Uro and Ryu had domain expansions is again a testament to the insanely different level that these sorcerers are on compared to what we are used to seeing until this point in the story. Anyway, all three of them had burnt out cursed techniques following domain expansion, and Uro, who was getting all icked out by Kurorushi, ended up getting her arm chomped on by Rika and then knocked out cold by Ryu's granite blast. Yes, you heard me. Despite being burnt out of his cursed energy discharge technique, Ryu Ishiguri can actually still release the same amount of power that he normally would even when being burnt out. After Ryu takes Uro out of the fight, Yuta then gifts us with one of the most underrated aura-filled panels in the entire series, I'm not gonna lie. He simply walks past Kurorushi and no-look one-shots him before squaring off with Ryu. It's so cool. The final battle will no longer be a hand-to-hand duel though, because Yuta has decided to try and beat Ryu at his own game. And so both of them raise their hands and begin charging up cursed energy as fast as they can to engage in an insane beam struggle. What's crazy is that the narrator chooses to glaze Yuta even more, stating that Yuta's beam is only slightly weaker than that of a sorcerer with the highest raw output in history. Due to his beam being weaker than Ryu's though, Yuta's plan was to rapidly build up cursed energy before Ryu could actually reach max power. At least that was his intention. But when Yuta looked into Ryu Ishiguri's eyes, all he saw was the intense look of 400 years worth of hunger and thirst. And so, although he'd probably never find meaning in fighting, Ishiguri's gaze melted poor Yuta Okkotsu's heart. So when Ryu requested that they each use every last drop of their power, Yuta abandoned his plan and decided that just this once, he would make an exception. They fire their full power beams in an amazing double spread and Ryu just about manages to win. When Rika and Yuta emerge from the smoke, Ryu asks delightedly that they should go again. This time though, Yuta's done playing around. Rika quickly fires the blast all on her own without any warning as Yuta then quickly closes the distance between them. Ryu finally has his turn of blocking a blast with only one hand, but by the time he had fired a counterattack it was too late. And so only 1 to 2 minutes after using domain expansion, Yuta Okkotsu had recovered his burnt out curse technique. Using Uro's sky manipulation ability that he had copied earlier in the fight, Yuta then deflected Granite Blast upwards in preparation for his final play. Yuta then slams Ryu with a thin icebreaker, which shows just how Yuta's natural genius and analytical abilities allow him to almost perfectly master copy techniques right away. Rika then batters him over the head, but Ryu's eyes do that really scary anime thing where they go all white and then Gege starts drawing mad speed lines, which you shouldn't take a genius to figure out what he's about to do. Sure enough, he then delivers one hell of a final blow to Rika right as the 5-minute window ran out, knocking her out for the rest of the fight. Ryu and Yuta throw hands yet again, but this time Yuta is a step ahead, so he grabs Ryu, holds him firmly in place, and simply watches as the granite blast that he deflected earlier comes crashing back down directly onto Ryu's head, knocking him out once and for all. When Ryu wakes up, they have a nice little chat about how Yuta is blessed and how he doesn't get the whole search for power thing, which is honestly actually just very wholesome. And while Ryu was knocked out, Yuji had successfully added the transfer rule, meaning that Yuta can now ask Ryu and Uro for their points. They agree, but what really shocks Ryu about being asked this is that he believes Yuta would have actually killed them all if it wasn't for that rule being added. Yuta neither confirms nor denies this outright, but he does smile and say that Ryu should be very grateful that Yuji had added that rule, which yeah, kind of implies that Yuta would have absolutely fried them without it. And so, in one single day, Yuta Okkotsu single-handedly took down the strongest colony in the entire Culling Games and walked away with a grand total of 192 points, making Yuta Okkotsu the official top-ranking Culling Game player. Okay, so when I say this fight is perfect shonen, I do not mean it is the best fight in shonen. I simply mean that it checks all the boxes of what makes a great shonen battle. It is a large-scale battle between some of the story's strongest fighters. There is a great variety of cool abilities, there are great themes and writings sown throughout the conflict, and there are just plain old hype moments and aura. Another very important thing is that it will translate very well into an anime adaptation with good pacing, especially because it's been done by Mappa. There are just no significant flaws to this stretch of chapters, and it keeps you engaged from the second it starts right until the last panel. I agree, it is definitely not the best thing ever written, or even close to being the best fight in Jujutsu Kaisen, but it is simply a textbook example of how to write the perfect shonen fight, especially in a tournament-style arc. With the exception of Gojo vs Sukuna, what do you think is the most iconic fight in Jujutsu Kaisen? Is it the Sukuna raid? Is it Yuji vs Chozo? Is it Yuji and Todo vs Mahito? Is it Sukuna vs Mahoraga? Or is it that one Culling Games fight which was so hype it transcended the series and set Jujutsu Kaisen on the path of having generational influence over anime and even non-anime related trends across all of social media? Yeah, it's definitely that one.
Let's go gambling!
I am of course talking about Hakari vs Kashimo, a fight so unbelievably loved that it became one of shonen's most iconic battles in recent times, despite not even being animated yet. The Tukadonka edits, the "this is a funeral for the living" quotes, the "that's how losers think" quotes, and of course the
Hakari never acquired reverse cursed technique
AI narrator posts that you see around social media to this very day. There is simply no denying that Hakari vs Kashimo is Jujutsu Kaisen's most iconic fight and a big reason why the series is so insanely popular, with the sole exception of Gojo vs Sukuna, of course. It might not be the best fight in the manga or even in your top 3, but you are simply delusional if you cannot recognize just how insanely iconic this fight has become. Therefore, in this edition of my Culling Games analysis series, I will be analyzing, critiquing, and glazing the fan favorite fight that is Kinji Hakari versus Hajime Kashimo, as well as discussing all the things that I think the anime really need to do in order to make sure it lives up to the massive hype. Before we get into it though, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, check out the membership options, and answer this one very important question for me, alright? Is this not the funniest thumbnail you've ever seen for a JJK video? I'm sorry, I need to point it out because literally every time I look at it, it nearly brings me to tears. Like, bro, why is Kashimo blushing? Oh, sorry, yeah, anyway, let's go. I'm gonna start things off by glazing Hakari, plain and simple. Which reminds me, everyone should go and like Gambler's comment because every time I mention Hakari's name, he just kind of spontaneously spawns into my comment section. Hakari was mentioned by Gojo way back in the beginning of the manga and immediately put in the same tier as Yuta, as well as being one of the many sorcerers that Gojo delusionally believed would surpass him. Following Shibuya, Yuji and Megumi recruit him to help participate in the Culling Games, but we don't see him do anything significant until he fights special grade bum Charles Bernard. And no, I will not be analysing that fight because who actually gives a fuck? It is then that we learn Hakari's technique is linked to his domain expansion just like Higuruma. He has a non-lethal sure hit that pours information about his technique into the opponent's head, which means it's supposedly, that's the key word here, strong in a domain clash and can activate the curse technique pretty much instantly. I mean, he can literally start spinning the wheel within 0.2 seconds. It's kind of crazy. To non-Japanese people who aren't familiar with pachinko machines, my advice to you is give up, bro. Just stop, okay? There is no point trying to understand the nitty-gritty details of how it works. All you need to know is that it's a slot machine which Hakari has absolutely rigged the hell out of to guarantee a jackpot within a certain amount of spins. The important part is that once he gets a jackpot, there are factors like increased probability or faster spins that he can access in the next round. It kind of works like a Black Flash, to be honest. Once Hakari gets a jackpot, he will just keep on getting them over and over until he eventually makes his opponent want to bash their skull into a brick wall. Throughout his fight with Kashimo, though, one thing becomes blatantly obvious. Hakari is a god-tier aura farmer. His fighting style is completely made up and performative, like some hybrid between scrappy street fighting and WWE. I mean, it's very clear that he has no training, or at least when he was given training, he paid no attention. It makes for a really interesting dynamic with Kashimo, who appears much more technical and more skilled than Hakari in hand-to-hand combat, but Hakari counters this by simply hitting much harder. Gege's phenomenal battle artwork in this fight makes it very clear to see that Hakari barely even budges when Kashimo lands direct hits, but when Hakari lands even one attack, it is enough to send Kashimo flying. Hakari's fighting style also involves him being stupidly aggressive and just eating damage because of his automatic healing and immortality when in jackpot. So when the two throw hands with each other, Kashimo often shows greater technique and lands more hits, and Hakari shows greater strength by really making it count when he lands a blow. Their fighting style isn't the only reason why these two have such a great dynamic though, because they are also the only two sorcerers who have a unique cursed energy trait. Kashimo has an electricity trait, which Hakari can completely ignore because he's just that guy, I guess. Alright, thanks Gege. And Hakari in turn has what Gege describes as sandpaper cursed energy. Cool. It started off as being hit by a serrated bat. Wow, that sounds like it does damage. That sounds dangerous, but no. Later on, we change it to sandpaper. Okay. Right, well, I guess it's still a cool concept, but in true Jujutsu Kaisen fashion, it's mentioned once and then literally never again. Which is honestly such a shame because I really hoped Kashimo would later teach Hakari how to best utilize his cursed energy trait, similar to how he does with his lightning. But oh well, I guess. Unlike Sendai Colony, where Yuta stood in stark contrast to the monsters that he was fighting because he loathed fighting, Hakari and Kashimo just so happened to both be monsters with the same "that's how losers think" mentality, which I thought was really cool. This might just be a coincidence, but I also love the fact that Hakari spams his curse technique, which makes him unkillable, whereas Kashimo can't even use his at all because it kills him. Actually, I believe Gege decided that Kashimo's curse technique would be a one-time use during this fight in order to try and fix one of the biggest problems I have with this fight as a whole, but more on that later because I am not done glazing just yet. What I hope you have taken away from this section is that Hakari and Kashimo, both being newly introduced characters, immediately stole the show and came together to create an incredibly unique and interesting matchup, which yet again demonstrates my overall point across my whole Culling Games analysis series, which is that Gege did an amazing job creating the actual matchups to be perfectly suited to each character. At this point in the story, Yuji works best in a battle of morals and ideals, Megumi works best in a contest of strategy and resolve, Yuta works best in a free-for-all where multiple different techniques are in play, and Hakari works best in an all-out 1v1 between merciless monsters who are in it purely for love of the game. Let's be real, that's why they're both here. Well, I say that Hakari's also here because he was promised to, get help setting up his illegal fight club and make it, a national level thing. Do you know what? That's not even relevant. It literally never comes up again. Anyway, I think pairing the guy who is famous for one-shotting all of his opponents effortlessly against a modern-day sorcerer who literally cannot die makes for a peak matchup. Realistically though, their dynamic is not what made this fight as iconic as it was. The real reason for that is simply hype moments and aura. There's really not much more to it. Mainly from Hakari, but Kashimo also had some bangers. I'm not even gonna try and deny that. I mean, Hakari has so much aura that he literally causes music to blast from his body when in jackpot, which makes him do things like dance and grab his crotch after sending a top 10 sorcerer flying into next Tuesday. Bro even pulls up to the fight with a cold superhero landing, and don't even get me started on that panel where he's literally just fully naked for no reason at all. To be honest, all the Tukadonka edits paired with Kashimo's "That's How Losers Think" and "Funeral for the Living" quotes are what should show up on Google if you search for the definition of aura. And again, with the exception of Gojo vs Sukuna, Hakari vs Kashimo also has the absolute best double spread panels and battle artwork in the entire series. I don't think anything else comes close. The brutality of the fight and the free use of graphic, violent injuries works so well, especially because Hakari can take all the injuries pretty much consequence-free. I mean, at one point, Kashimo splits Hakari's entire face open by smacking him with a steel door. Like, come on, surely anime pain just works differently to normal pain, because there is no way this 18-year-old kid is grinning like a madman psychopath after having his face literally ripped off his skeleton. And hardly anyone actually remembers this moment, because it comes straight after back-to-back double spreads where they both race towards shipping containers and proceed to literally volley one in between each other until it's nothing more than a strip of tinfoil. Unfortunately though, the iconic moments in this fight were not the only thing to come out of it, because all the power scaling sons decided to lock in and push some serious Jujutsu Kaisen agenda. Which is completely fine, I don't have a problem with people doing that, but it's kind of weird when they act as if you're gonna go to hell if you dare disagree with them. And I am, of course, talking about the cursed lightning dodge discourse that this chapter caused. You see, Kashimo has the ability to separate the positive and negative charge of his electricity. When physically striking his opponent, he can place a positive charge on their body, and once enough negative charge has been accumulated in his own body, he can discharge a bolt of lightning through the air that is drawn to the positive charge on his opponent, which creates a sort of domainless sure hit, but it functions the same way as a lightning speed homing attack. Kashimo does this to Hakari pretty early on in the fight and severs Hakari's arm, which he then instantly regenerates and smacks Kashimo in the face. But what's incredibly awkward about this moment is the kind of very weird paneling that Gege chose to use for this moment, because it looks as if the bolt was initially aiming for Hakari's head. Now, many people use this to argue that Hakari dodged lightning and scaled JJK top tiers to lightning speed. Now, I think it's possible, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't be surprised, but based on the fact that Kashimo makes a point about aiming for his head with the exact same attack later on in the fight, and Hakari not being able to move in time despite him mentally reacting to it, which I'll give him credit for, this kind of indicates, to me at least, that the bolt was always headed for his arm and Hakari didn't dodge shit. Also, the fact that it's a homing attack that literally cannot be dodged by definition should support this, but JJK fans don't read, so whatever. At the same time though, I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's definitely not the case, because it is a fictional story written by a guy who has made it very clear he doesn't give a single crap about power scaling, only about what looks cool and works for the story, which is why I respect Gege so much, because, you know, screw power scaling, it stinks. Despite the boring scaling discourse that this fight created for JJK though, the hype moments and aura of Hakari's entrance, Kashimo's quotes, the domain expansions, the jackpots, the hand-to-hand, and the subtle aura farming moments, like when Hakari, you know, casually floats from a hanging cursed spirit like he's Mary Poppins, is the reason why this fight ultimately became so iconic. It's the moments like this. There were so many opportunities for edits, memes, and social media trends that this fight created, and fortunately for us, the Jujutsu Kaisen fanbase grabbed hold of every single one of those opportunities, which of course led to this fight's massive success. Now, in terms of the actual fight between Hakari and Kashimo, there really isn't much for me to analyze beyond the hype moments that I've already discussed and the hidden depth behind Hakari. I mean, it's not like you want to sit here listening to me just describe every single page to you. It's an analysis video. I'm not trying to narrate an audiobook here. Which is why I wanted to make a section discussing what I think the anime really does need to do in order to make sure that this fight lives up to its slightly unrealistic expectations. Because to be completely honest, I feel like a decent amount of fans are actually going to be slightly disappointed with the anime's adaptation, due to them expecting something that aligns more with the edits and memes. Tukadonka is not going to be played. Hakari's theme song is literally a love song with lyrics so cheesy that I'm very glad we're only going to have to hear them in Japanese. Despite it being a love song though, they definitely can still make it hype and match the tone of the fight, which is something I think they definitely need to do in order to meet expectations. The animation itself will obviously be top tier, I have no doubt about that, but what will really make or break this fight in Season 3 are factors like music, voice acting, choreography, pacing, and additional content, potentially. Seeing improvements from the manga be put into the anime is what every JJK fan is hoping for, and in my opinion, there are some great opportunities for it in this fight. First of all, I hope MAPPA does what they did for Shibuya fights and just make them both look way stronger. I mean, I know they are already hella strong, I'm not trying to downplay them, alright? I just want more. Forget accurate scaling, no one cares, just make sure they look hella impressive. I mean, if you go and read Jogo versus Sukuna in the manga, it's like half a chapter long. It's a couple of pages and nowhere near as impressive as what we see, which is why Jogo looks so much stronger in the anime than he does in the manga. That is good. Do that. Screw scaling, I don't care, alright? If you want to have Hakari just outright dodging the lightning, do it. I'm not going to be mad, I think it'll be great, alright? And then we can all ignore the inconsistent scaling in the manga and just stick with the anime. I'm fine with that, that's cool. Change the Naoya Mark III statement while you're at it, alright? Yeah, do it all. I also would love to see Hakari's themes of luck be applied to Black Flash in that fight, because I thought that was a big missed opportunity for him, and it would help solidify the idea that he truly is a Jujutsu top tier. I mean, I would say that I doubt they would make such a big change, but they literally did the exact same thing for Yuta in JJK Volume 0 for the same reason, so who knows. Choreography is also a massively important factor in fights, but based on how MAPPA has handled Jujutsu Kaisen so far, I definitely have faith that they will do a good job. And this fight is already, kind of laid out for them choreography-wise, because Gege puts a lot of time and effort into drawing the fight and the little in-between moments where they're just throwing hands. Just like I said in my Sendai analysis video, manga readers often gloss over the smaller details and wordless panels of the fight because there isn't anything to read, which makes sense, it's fine, but at the same time it fools people into only really remembering the highlights of the fight. That is why anime is so important, because all those panels of hand-to-hand combat and minor details become way more apparent when you actually see them as part of an animated sequence. I also just really hope the color scheme for these characters is unique as hell. Like, please, give Hakari purple cursed energy, for the love of God, just do it. In fact, this fight would be even more awesome if MAPPA pulled a JoJo's and changed up the hues and color gradients used during the hype moments. Something like that would fit really well with Hakari's whole aesthetic in my opinion, because I think Hakari could deadass just be a JoJo's character. Considering that it is MAPPA though, I have full faith in the anime adaptation of this fight, and would be happy with anything on par with what they've currently shown us. I just wanted to warn you guys about not expecting it to be the same as all the iconic edits where Tukadonka is used. Now, if I tried to discuss every single thing about this fight that made it so great, we would genuinely be here for hours. So instead, I'm gonna keep it at this and move on to discuss something that you probably never thought you would ever hear, especially not from me. Aura and hype moments aside, I think Kinji Hakari has some amazing and criminally underrated writing. As discussed in depth in my previous Culling Games videos, Gojo's strongest students each have their own unique way of representing the very long-running theme of reforming Jujutsu society and breaking the cycle of curses. Yuji's role in that is to continue Gojo's dream and save people from going down a cursed and dark path, just like he did with Higuruma. Yuta then kind of stoops down to Gojo's level instead of rising above it, and tries to save Gojo himself from that very same curse of isolation, which isn't what Gojo wants for him. He wanted Yuta to be better, but that's what Yuji's for. Despite it being much less apparent in the story and very different though, Hakari also has his own unique role to play in this very theme. You see, what Hakari's character is meant to represent is progressive change in the world, which is a big part of why Gojo holds him in such high regard. I mean, the reason why Jujutsu higher-ups looked down on Hakari in the first place was because of his gambling-focused technique. It was too modern and not traditional enough for their taste. His obsession with gambling, manga, and the fever is a very youthful theme, which the old heads in Jujutsu society look down on. The most important part of this theme, however, is Kirara and Urame's dynamic with Hakari. Everyone had a jolly old time busting jokes about Hakari collecting femboys when he was fighting Urame, but I think the decision to put Hakari against Urame was for a very deliberate and theme-driven reason, which lots of people actually decided to gloss over. Well, not decided, I'm not saying it was deliberate, it's just people weren't clocking. It's fine. But during his official introduction, Hakari is very strongly implied to have a romantic/sexual relationship with Kirara, who was born a biological male, but is a more feminine-presenting sorcerer. For the vocal minority of absolute weirdos who are in complete denial of progressive themes like this being present in your story, allow me to share definitive evidence of what I'm saying. saying. Kurara is stated to be a biological male at birth, but clearly feels more comfortable presenting themselves in a feminine manner, and similar to Arame, their gender identity is never actually stated outright. I believe Gege leaves it deliberately kind of open for interpretation. Now, as for how I know that Kurara's relationship with Hakari is romantic or sexual in nature, well, he's literally sitting there clasping onto Kurara's butt cheeks like his life depends on it. So unless you often do that in a platonic relationship with your homies, argue with the wall. Similarly, Hakari always referred to Arame as they and never used a gender-conforming pronoun for them. For those of you who don't know, Gege recently confirmed that Arame was biologically a male in the Heian era, who personally requested that they be reincarnated into a female body by Kenjaku, which strongly suggests that Arame doesn't identify as male. Again, since their actual gender identity is unconfirmed, it's reasonable to use they or she. I think Gege does leave these things open for interpretation. The fact that Hakari has a relationship with Kurara and would go on to be Urame's opponent in the final fight plays very strongly into Hakari's theme of being a youthful and progressive sorcerer that perfectly aligns with what Gojo wants the new generation to be, and goes against pretty much everything the old generation of Jujutsu sorcerers, stand for. Again, it's much more subtle than Yuta and Yuji's representation of the theme, but it is present nonetheless, and I really like it. So, despite being a character mostly carried by his hype moments and aura, Hakari is actually deceptively well written for the admittedly short time that he actually appears in the manga. And that is his main flaw as a character, and why his writing kind of falls short is because he's just not around enough. Okay, as for Hakari himself, I have absolutely no criticisms whatsoever for this fight, and to be honest, I don't have any for Kashimo either. Most of the problems with each of these characters are more so to do with their lacking performance later on in the manga, which obviously has nothing to do with this fight. I also have no critiques about the execution of the fight itself. We all know that it's peak. My absolute biggest problem with this whole section, though, is that from a character perspective, having these two be each of their first proper on-screen fights poses a massive problem for them moving forward. Hakari had obviously been gassed up by the likes of Yuta and Gojo for as far back as, the detention center arc, and Kashimo was set up to be a top-tier sorcerer that wants to face Sukuna because he was way too strong for any other opponent he has ever faced. Both characters have a narrative that demands a performance and success, but by having their first big fight be against each other, it inevitably leads to one of them losing. Hakari obviously couldn't lose because of all his hype and build-up, but Kashimo losing kind of undermined his whole theme of wanting to fight the strongest because no one else could even hold a candle to him. Kashimo did lose though, plain and simple. It's likely the first time he ever flat out lost to another sorcerer, and he was ready to accept his fate at the hands of Hakari because of it. The Kashimo Glazers won't agree, which is completely fine. I'm not trying to convince you otherwise at all, I'm simply explaining my own opinion on the matter. I speculate that Gege also recognized this problem and designed Kashimo's curse technique to be a one-time use, which he would only ever use against Sukuna in order to try and nullify this issue, which wasn't a terrible idea, to be honest. At least it wouldn't have been a bad idea if he had actually done something when he finally did use his bum-ass technique later on. By having Hakari win and then saying Kashimo was fighting without his curse technique the whole time allows Hakari to have a necessary victory while also showing that Kashimo is actually still strong enough to live up to his themes. And again, this probably would have worked out completely fine if Gege didn't fumble Kashimo later on. Does this problem really matter to me that much though? No. Would I instead choose to not have this fight exist in order to avoid such an issue? Definitely not. The fight is so good that I honestly don't care that much. It just sucks that Kashimo never really landed as an interesting or particularly impressive character to me. However, I have a sneaking suspicion that the anime might make me switch up and give me a good reason to actually like Kashimo. At least I really hope that it does. I want to finish things off here by clearing something up that any long-time viewer of mine is probably wondering right now. Why am I switching up and choosing to glaze Hakari? Don't I normally slander Hakari? Yes, I do. I do normally slander the out of Hakari, okay? But the reason I don't like Hakari is because I really like Hakari. Okay, that makes no sense, but hear me out. Hakari is the GOAT, plain and simple. Hakari is an insanely cool character with an incredibly unique design and a peak curse technique. He is by all accounts the perfect character and an amazing addition to Jujutsu Kaisen's top tiers. The reason I dislike him is because of how horrifically, terribly Gege fumbled the bag. He is easily the most wasted character in all of Jujutsu Kaisen, contested only by Yuki Yuki and Kenjaku. Bro fights Kashimo and then has about 3 speaking lines before getting half a chapter fighting Arame, where he stresses over losing his Jordans and then is pretty much never heard of again. He didn't even win the fight, he just stalemated Arame off screen and literally never even met Sukuna face to face. Hakari went from being a generational GOAT to a generational fumble, and it really sucks. Still though, Hakari versus Kashimo as a fight is peak, and it will hopefully blow up the internet once again when MAPPA animates it. When we talk about evil in Jujutsu Kaisen, Sukuna, Kenjaku, and Mahito are usually the names that come to the forefront of people's minds. Kenjaku even holds the title of most evil sorcerer in history, because of the dark and sadistic way he created the curse wombs 150 years ago. Likewise, Sukuna is driven by nothing more than his own desires. He is bored and does evil things without caring in order to satisfy that boredom. That is what makes these characters inherently evil beings. However, there is a big difference between being evil and committing an evil act without being an inherently evil person. The villains of the story are all evil beings, but there are some instances of characters in Jujutsu Kaisen that commit evil acts for other reasons, and it is my belief that one of the biggest acts of evil committed in the entire series was carried out by none other than Maki Zenin. So in this episode of my Culling Games analysis, I am going to be discussing the forgotten crimes of Maki Zenin, what they mean for her character, and how her fights in the Culling Games arc are some of the most unique and interesting fights in the series. As always, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's get straight into analysing the story of the monster Maki Zenin. Maki Zenin committed an act of blatant evil which many people in the fandom actually just completely forget about, and to be honest, I don't blame you, because it is kind of presented in a way that makes you more inclined to side with Maki. I am of course talking about that day Maki awakened her true heavenly restriction and proceeded to massacre the entire Zenin clan. First of all, the entire event is one of the best parts of Jujutsu Kaisen, and one of the most underrated parts too. I mean, there are so many people who either read JJK through TikTok or skipped the Culling Games and picked up from Gojo vs Sukuna, who genuinely know nothing about the Zenin clan massacre or about other smaller details, like the fact Megumi actually became the Zenin clan head after Jogo killed Naobito. So after being baited into the lower levels of Zenin HQ, Maki finds her twin sister Mai in a seriously injured state thanks to her father Ogi Zenin, who then leaves the twins for dead in a room filled with cursed spirits. However, in a beautiful scene where both of their souls resonate and allow them to communicate with each other, Mai reveals the importance of twins in Jujutsu and explains to both Maki and the readers how cursed energy considers each twin to be one and the same, which means that as long as Mai has cursed energy, Maki will still register as having just a little bit of cursed energy, and as long as Mai has no interest in getting stronger, Maki will be permanently held back. Mai effectively gives up her life so that Maki can fully awaken, rid herself of all cursed energy entirely, and become a heavenly restriction user equal to Toji Zenin. She also utilized a binding vow where she exchanged her life for the ability to construct the special grade curse tool Soul Split Katana, which she left with her sister alongside a final message: destroy everything. Bear in mind that Maki and Mai's hatred for the Zenin clan and their cruel ways existed and festered within them long before this moment, and Maki had always made it her mission to take control of the Zenin clan. She lacked the power to actually do it right until now though. Even when Yuta jokingly offered to help her, she said that she wanted to do it alone or it would be meaningless. To rise up the ranks and eradicate one of Jujutsu Society's most powerful sorcerer families ever, and doing so all alone, was simply just an impossible task. But thanks to her father's actions and the death of her sister Mai, Maki soon found that a once impossible task had become a whole lot more realistic. She already had the motive before, but after witnessing her twin sister die right in front of her due to her father's direct actions, Maki found herself overwhelmed with rage and a newfound strength. And so just moments after exiting the room, Ogi basically just let one rip in his underwear because he felt the familiar aura of Toji Zenin, who the entire Zenin clan to this day is terrified of. But it was not Toji, it was Maki Zenin, his daughter. Maki then proceeded to kill her flame-wielding father where he stood and continue to annihilate the entirety of the Zenin clan. Now remember, the Zenin clan pride themselves on having many strong curse techniques and skilled fighters, many of who are in that high grade 1 level. They even had different military squads and specialist units, but the raw power of Maki Zenin could simply not be compared with. Despite facing all of the Zenin's strongest fighters at once, Maki pretty much low-diffed all of them until she was left with only the worst of the worst. The professional misogynist who deluded himself into thinking he would be the one to stand at the top of Jujutsu society alongside his idols Satoru Gojo and Toji Zenin. A delusion which Maki swiftly put an end to by showing Naoya the insane difference in their strength before Maki's mother finished the job by placing a knife deep in his back, and declaring for the very first time that she was actually glad Maki had been born. Yeah, that one chapter alone is definitely enough to make you understand exactly why Maki did what she did, even if it did involve cutting down her own mother. Across the short collection of chapters covering the Zenin massacre though, we only see Maki actually cut down grown-ass men who are sent out to fight her. We see the sorcery fights and the sorcery fights only, so it's pretty easy to make the assumption that she just beat everyone who fought back and then called it a day. But in reality, that is just not what happened. What many people fail to realize is that Maki did not only kill the combatants, she slaughtered absolutely every single member of the entire clan over the course of multiple days until only herself and Megumi Fushiguro remained. And we know this because at the very end of the massacre, the narrator states that all clan members not present that day would die violent deaths in the days to follow. The key phrase here is, of course, all Zenin clan members, which means she killed absolutely everybody who was part of the clan, not just the military units. For starters, we know that Zenin HQ is massive, with many servants and other non-combatants like Maki's mother living in the facility. She would have killed all of these people too. I mean, sure, some of them may be scum like her mother, but they are still products of their environment who have their own trauma and history with abuse. I'm not saying they deserve to be put to death. And another way we know she killed these people is that we actually see Maki's mother in the kitchen, and the kitchen is drenched in blood. Now, I don't know if you know anything about the Zenin clan, but there is definitely no men in that kitchen, so she did just go in there and slaughter everybody. The absolute darkest part about all of this, though, is that they were almost definitely innocent children there who were no different to Maki and Mai. It is not their fault they were born into that clan, they would just be innocent victims of the Zenin clan's abuse that were mercilessly cut down by Maki's rage-fueled rampage. Sure, there is no direct confirmation of this, but it is very strongly implied, and there is absolutely no reason to believe she left any survivors. Killing all of the Zenin's fighters and abusers would technically still be a crime, but is it one that would justify me labeling her as evil for doing? Not really, because they definitely had it coming, and her motivation is probably the best you can get, let's be real. However, when you realize that Momo refers to Maki as a monster from that point on, with pure terror in her eyes, it is because Momo knows that she mercilessly cut down children and lowly servants. The crime suddenly looks a lot more evil than you would initially think it does when you consider that possibility, you know? And that is what goes very overlooked when it comes to Maki Zenin. She is not an evil person, but rather someone traumatized by her upbringing and her sister's death, who became blinded by rage and revenge, which led to her committing a truly evil act that I do believe is comparable to things Sukuna has done in the series. I don't think this act is that much worse than what we've actually seen the likes of Sukuna do. The only difference is that Sukuna has no motive and is inherently evil, whereas Maki isn't. When rereading the events of the Zenin massacre for this video, I actually stumbled across a quote from one of the chapters which sums up Maki very well. When fighting Maki, Ranta Zenin's internal dialogue tells us this: "The current Zenin clan exists because of Master Toji's whim." That quote really stuck with me because I realized it meant the Zenin clan was always aware of the fact that Toji possessed the strength to take them down single-handedly. They were only allowed to actually continue existing because of Toji's whim, literally. Meaning they were lucky that Toji moved on and did his own thing without bearing any resentment for the clan that rejected him the same way it rejected Maki. This is meant to show us two important things. One, Maki has now got the physical prowess equal to Toji, which makes taking down the Zenin clan a piece of cake. And two, Maki is not Toji Zenin. They may have the same abilities, but they are not the same person, not even close. I'm very glad Gege attempted to make this clear distinction, but with anime fans being anime fans, they naturally treated Maki as if she was just Toji 2.0 and nothing more. In reality though, she was the exact opposite of Toji. Toji had every reason to harbour as much hate for the Zenin as Maki, but he never had any interest in exacting revenge. He held no grudge and just wanted to live his own life on his own terms, which is something said by himself as he's about to be killed by Gojo. Maki, on the other hand, was not as forgiving as Toji. Revenge is all that was on her mind, and she became exactly what the Zenin clan feared Toji would one day become. Which is something I find very symbolic, because the fact the Zenin were well aware of the fact Toji could turn on them actually indicates they were also aware of the potential consequences of their twisted and abusive actions. And yet the cycle of curses and violence continues to repeat itself, because even after realizing this about Toji, they continued the abuse of those they deemed lesser than themselves, which is ultimately what led to their actions finally catching up to them in the form of Maki Zenin's revenge-driven massacre. I'm sure some people will have different interpretations or disagree with mine, which is completely fine. This is just how I see it. While fighting human Naoya, Maki got a little bit too excited and punched him in the face so hard it literally left an imprint of her fist on his cheek, which is like, wow, damn, I wish Yuki would do that to me. Anyway, let's be honest, this was definitely deserved. Like, the dude is the most misogynistic and egotistical prick in recent shonen. It honestly felt very satisfying seeing him get bodied and then stabbed in the back by Maki's mother. The problem here is that Maki should have finished him off with her cursed tool, because what happens when a sorcerer dies from something other than cursed energy? That's right, they turn into a vengeful cursed spirit many times stronger than the original sorcerer. Naoya went from a decent grade 1 Chozo victim to a special grade cursed spirit that people often consider to be top 15 in the verse, and above most of the disaster curses, which, let's be real, I think he definitely is. Many days later, Maki met up with Noritoshi Kamo, who has actually become a half-decent guy ever since Kenjaku took over the Kamo clan, using some unexplained tomfoolery technique from the Heian era, which meant Kamo's entire goal of becoming clan head kind of went flying out the window. He now basically considers himself a complete failure of a son who couldn't make the Kamo clan a safe place for his mum, and now he's out here avoiding his problems by shooting blood arrows at very questionable looking curses. But unlike Maki, Kamo's mother is very much alive, and all she really wants is for him to come back to her and leave the clan behind. And so, after moping around feeling sorry for himself in Sakurajima Colony, it seems he does eventually realize this, and that's why it makes perfect sense for him to call it quits and go home instead of fighting in the Sukuna raid. Honestly, he might have the happiest ending in the whole series, so good for him. Anyway, Naoya turned into a cursed womb and was so hateful that he even managed to retain his personality and memories after becoming a vengeful spirit. His first order of business was of course to slam Maki into a wall while completely perception blitzing Kamo in the process. Yeah, I'm gonna be real, Kamo is kind of an anomaly in this fight, because one minute he's being literally perception blitzed by Curse Womb Naoya, and the next he's blocking a point-blank attack from a charged up Mark III Naoya. I don't know, it's kind of just weird. Naturally though, Maki shrugs this attack off, but then kind of just gets bullied for the next few pages. That is, until Kamo and Maki beat the womb up a bit, causing it to transform into its actual cursed form, which is... oh, yep, that is a literal floating female genitalia. Cool. I mean, of course Gege decided to make the misogynistic sorcerer who is obsessed with muscly men into a literal you-know-what. He even decided to make his official colour pink. Like, come on, how much more obvious do you need to make it? And yes, Naoya is canonically obsessed with standing at the top with Toji and Gojo, who are very muscular men. So I think you will find that all of my statements are completely true and valid. Naoya still seems obsessed with the idea of standing at the top alongside those two, and he wants to prove that by defeating Maki, who has supposedly become an equal to Toji. I say supposedly though, because something is still missing, and she realizes this too after a little while of being beaten up by Naoya. There were things that Toji could see that she couldn't see, and things that he could do that she couldn't do. She just needed to figure out what those were, and until she did, Naoya was just gonna keep on besting her with his superior Mark III speed. And yes, that is correct. Maki Zenin, who is equal to Toji in stats, is slower than a Mark III Naoya, which is a statement that threw the entire JJK power scaling community into a complete frenzy. But guess what? I don't care, because power scaling stinks, so I'm just gonna move on and not even talk about it. Yeah, you there, commenting right now about how you think JJK is 67 times the speed of light. Stop, it's a waste of time, I don't care. Anyway, Naoya has learnt a few tricks, like freezing panels of air and then ramming into them so fast they cause a chain reaction of explosions, which I don't really understand how that's possible, but sure. He can also massively boost his speed to Mark III by propelling air and cursed energy out of his side jets, in addition to a binding vow, where he can completely enclose himself in a super tough exoskeleton when charging up, but as a result he becomes a lot squishier when not zooming around the place. Because of the speed difference and the fact that she can't cut through Naoya's tough armor yet, Maki Maki gets her stomach ripped to shreds, but according to her, it will only take 5 minutes for her heavenly restriction to work its healing magic. Unfortunately for Kamo though, it meant he had to keep a special grade curse occupied for an entire 5 minutes, which, to be fair, he made a very solid attempt at, but was ultimately saved by Maki, who got impatient and rejoined the fight after only 3 minutes. However, Maki finds that she still can't really do anything to Naoya the way she is now, but that will change after 2 of Jujutsu Kaisen's most mysterious and random characters ever decide to join the battle. I am of course talking about katana-obsessed Daido and the sumo-obsessed Mio. To be completely honest, Daido and Mio kind of frustrate me a little bit because their appearance in the fight at this exact moment is perhaps one of the most convenient and weirdly coincidental things to ever happen in Jujutsu Kaisen. Like, are you really trying to tell me that a blind swordsman with no control over curse energy just so happens to see and sense everything the same way Toji did, and also just so happens to be one of the reincarnated sorcerers in the same colony as the newly awakened heavenly restriction user who needs to learn this exact ability in order to beat her opponent? And are you really telling me a crazy sumo-obsessed sorcerer just so happens to find them at exactly the same time, who not only understands just how the ability works, but he can also teach the principles of it to Maki over a long period of time because he just so happens to have a simple domain where time moves 1,000 times faster inside of it? Okay, whatever. That makes absolutely no damn sense. I don't know how people say there are arse-pools with sukuna making binding vows when this literally exists. Yeah, that pretty much sums up what happens though. I don't want to go any deeper into it, because truth be told, there really isn't anything particularly deep behind the mysterious Katana Man and the ADHD-riddled sumo dude. What is very, very cool about this interaction though is the artwork and the way that Gege actually chooses to explain this precognition-like ability. As Daido explains, by seeing and sensing everything around you, you can also see what you can't see. Okay, I realize I explained that horribly. Let me try again. By seeing and sensing absolutely everything possible, you will naturally notice when there is something missing that you can't physically see because of how that thing changes the things you can see. Okay, that doesn't really make much sense either. One more try, alright? Give me one more go. She's got spider sense. There, does it make sense now? Good. She can use this special Zenin sense to work out where Naoya is going to be before he even gets there and react to his movements accordingly, which is kind of why some people call it precognition. This obviously pisses Naoya off to no end, because even though he is still faster than Maki, she can actually dodge and land attacks of her own now. Before she starts kicking Naoya's ass with this newfound ability though, we get some incredible panels, including a double spread of the moment Maki finally understands what Daido and Mio have been trying to teach her. It's an ability born from the user finding what they call freedom. You see, after awakening her strength on par with Toji, she was able to finally see curses, which made her quite content with just being like everyone else. But by allowing herself to unwind and find freedom, she came to the realization that she could see so much more than everyone else. Which is kind of where Maki's gojo-related themes come into play. For the entire fight, Naoya has had an obsession with standing at the top with Toji and Gojo, but at the end of this fight, it is Maki who ends up standing with them because she became a true equal to Toji after realizing the extent of her abilities. No, this does not mean that Maki or Toji are as strong as Gojo. It is a writing and character-related theme revolving around their strength and experience of being at the top. The theme does not require them to be equal to Gojo in order for it to work, so relax yourself. What makes this idea really neat though is that Toji and Gojo, who Naoya considers the top dogs of recent Jujutsu times, both possess the ability to see more than your normal sorcerer. Gojo and his 6 eyes perceive every little detail about a person and can even reveal things like how their technique works and details about their cursed energy, whereas Toji has his enhanced senses and precognition, which allows him to see everything down to disturbances in air temperature, humidity, and stuff like that which you can't normally see. Their physical perception of the world being different to everyone else's is meant to symbolize how their figurative perception of the world also differs from everyone else's, and as a result it becomes difficult for others to truly understand them, which is also why Gege implied that the only one who could understand Toji was actually Gojo himself. Naoya thought that he belonged at the top with these two, but as a result of his actions, Maki awakened her enhanced perception ability and took his place. Maki awakening this ability of enhanced perception is basically meant to symbolize her taking a step closer to Gojo and finding her place in his dream moving forward. I actually think the lack of interactions between Gojo and Maki after she became an equal to Toji is one of the bigger letdowns of the series, because there was so much potential there for some really cool stuff and we just never got to see it. Again, I'm not saying that Maki is as strong as Gojo or will ever be as strong as Gojo, because that's silly. It's just that Maki's own unique way of understanding Gojo differs from Yuji and Yuta's, as I've discussed many times in previous videos. At least that's how I interpret this part of the story. It's completely cool if you disagree or don't want to look this stupidly far into it, but I quite like it. One very important thing that I haven't spoken about yet though is the Soul Split Katana and how it became so much more dangerous after Maki awakened her perception ability. You see, first of all, when Daido pulls up, the weapon literally flies... Jesus Christ. Okay, the first thing I want to mention is that when Daido pulls up to the fight, the weapon literally flies out of Maki's hand and into Daido's, which I never realized quite how hilariously funny this is until I actually read it in this fight. It's just so goofy to see the sword literally kind of fly out of Maki's hand and into this blind old man. So it's weird. Apparently, it's because the sword chooses the wielder and it chose Daido. Why? Well, it's because the super perception ability Daido, Maki, and Toji use also allows them to perceive the souls of living creatures and inanimate objects. And a key detail about the Soul Split Katana that everybody forgets is that it only works properly if the user can perceive the soul. Before awakening her super senses, Maki's sword strikes were not enough to fully pierce Naoya's armor, but after awakening this ability and truly becoming equal to Toji, she became capable of slicing through absolutely anything like butter. With the sole exception of Satoru Gojo, of course. And then we fast forward a bit to Naoya freaking out over Maki getting so insanely strong and expanding his newly acquired domain expansion for the very first time. It's a very broken domain that literally tears you apart cell by cell if you don't follow the 24 FPS rule, which is pretty much impossible. It turns out Naoya didn't read the series though, because he did not know that Maki and Toji are completely immune to a domain's sure hit, because domains cannot detect things with no cursed energy. So she waltzed right in there, sliced him in half, and got on with her day. Also, before you all go, oh, actually, Gojo's domain works on people with no cursed energy because the people in Shibuya got hit. For the love of God, I beg, just go read the series, man. Normal people do have cursed energy. Like the muggles of the world, they do have cursed energy, alright? Just not a lot of it. Maki and Toji are special cases because they have absolutely zero, nothing, literally the same amount as a brick. Anyway, that is the end of my analysis video for Maki Zenin's story throughout the Culling Games, for now at least. Which of course means we are finally going to be moving on to the highly anticipated Yuki vs Kenjaku fight. Yuki and Chozo vs Kenjaku is a top 3 fight in Jujutsu Kaisen, and it will be the best animated fight of Season 3. At least, it will be if the animators are actually allowed to see their family this time. Yuki vs Kenjaku, top 3. Yuji, Yuta, Megumi, and Maki are all characters we have been invested in ever since the beginning of Jujutsu Kaisen's runtime. Hell, even Hakari was set up right at the start. And yet, somehow, this mysterious blonde woman with less than 2 minutes of screen time completely stole the show and gave Jujutsu Kaisen one of its most intense and high-stakes fights ever. What's kinda crazy is that, unlike almost all other fights in Jujutsu Kaisen's Culling Games arc, Yuki vs Kenjaku is actually incredibly flawed. Even a professional glazer and Yuki-guna like myself has to admit that there are some elements of this confrontation that are just straight up stupid. And yet, it is still in my top 3 JJK fights of all time for one very simple reason. Okay, not one, but a very simple reason. Brace yourself though, because some anime fans are known to spontaneously combust when they hear this. The primary reason why I think Yuki and Chozo vs Kenjaku is so good is because of hype moments and aura. Ayo, sit your ass back down, I am not done yet.
Don't go anywhere!
No, I'm not saying that this fight is carried by hype moments and aura in the same way that Solo Leveling or other animes like, maybe it is just Solo Leveling. But the point is, Gege Akutami did an incredible job at creating this air of mystery around Jujutsu Society's 4th and final special grade sorcerer, known as Yuki Tsukumo. And not only that, but the last time we saw Kenjaku making big moves like this, we didn't even know that he was called Kenjaku. He became a massive unknown variable who always seemed to have the aura of a top tier sorcerer. However, one of, if not the biggest, flaws in Jujutsu Kaisen is how little it fleshes out characters with potential, just like Yuki and Kenjaku. We desperately craved fights like Hakari vs Arame, Yuta vs Kenjaku, Sukuna vs the Heian era, and hell, even the old Gojo head vs the old Zenin head, so that we could see the actual top tier sorcerers fight to the death. And yet, time and time again, Gege would build them up and fail to deliver, either showing them off screen or simply leaving them as a vague statement. Yuki and Chozo vs Kenjaku, however, was the exception. Gege subtly built up the hype behind each of these characters and then actually delivered for once by dropping 7 consecutive chapters of absolute cinema. What takes this fight to the next level though is that there were many other factors such as the battle artwork, the location, the techniques used, and the themes woven throughout the fight that both complement and enhance the hype brought about by being able to finally see a true special grade versus special grade fight. So despite the flaws, which I will discuss briefly later on, every other aspect of the fight is very well executed. So well that I would be lying if I said I think it belongs anywhere other than top 3. Or that it won't be the best fight of Season 3 as long as Mappa stays on track. But again, that's just my personal take. Before I dive a little bit deeper into the highs and lows of the fight though, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and do consider becoming a channel member to get special perks such as early access to big videos just like this one, and even access to exclusive members only videos which will be arriving on the channel soon. Genuinely, do take a look because it will be well worth it. Anyway, let's get started. So I've had Wallace and Gromit stuck in my head all day. I'm sorry, I needed to do that. Anyway, Chozo... That's such a weird thing to put in a video. Leave that in, Josh. That was funny as hell. Chozo is someone that Kenjaku says is on the level of a grade 1 Jujutsu sorcerer, and based on how their previous fight went down, it was very clear to see that he never really stood a chance against his dear old daddy. I'm never saying that again. God damn, that was so wrong. Yuki knew this too during their prep time though, because she straight up told Chozo that his ass would get low def, which, come on, you don't need to be that rude. Chozo had the brilliant idea of him going out alone in order to sniff out Kenjaku's extra cursed technique and maybe his domain along with it, which, thanks Chozo, you've potentially robbed us of what could have been an even better fight than this one where Yuki and Kenjaku domain clash. In the end though, Tengen and Yuki improve on this plan by agreeing to send Chozo out first and just let him die in order to expose Kenjaku's secret technique, and then Yuki will step in to bait out Kenjaku's domain, which she will counter with a simple domain while Tengen tears the barrier apart from the outside. Because Tengen, let me remind you, is supposedly the best barrier user of all time, so obviously Tengen would have no problem doing this to any barrier, right? Right? So yeah, Chozo pretty much just gets sent out to die though, that's the gist of it. And because Chozo gets sent out to die, we think there's no way that Gege could actually give us a blatantly one-sided high-stakes fight, right? Well, wrong, because that is somehow exactly what he did. We knew Chozo would never win, but winning was never his goal. All he had to do was force Kenjaku to use a technique other than Curse Spirit manipulation. Gege gave Chozo an achievable goal in an unwinnable situation. Sure, it would definitely have been cool to see Yuki use her domain, but if the fight was just a basic head-on conflict, then Chozo would have never been given the chance to spread his wings. Literally. Kenjaku's aura entering the barrier, causing the previously normal-looking area to turn into an empty void, is probably one of the most memorable aura panels in the entire series. I will never forget that moment. Go watch Ninjaristic Ninja's MMV of like Kenjaku walking through the barrier. It's just glorious. It's wow. And from that point onwards, everything just keeps ramping up more and more, because after yapping about the merger and beating the crap out of Chozo for a bit, we are gifted with a truly magical Chozo moment. A Choment. A Chozoment. Anyway, this Chozoment included him being blasted with a load of reinforced curses, which obviously stripped him of his shirt because Gege is a gooner for men. And I low-key get it though, because damn, Chozo, I didn't realize you were jacked like that, but I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic. He deadass then becomes the main character for this chapter because he connects with his brothers and imitates their abilities to actually then start pressing Kenjaku. And only shirtless Chozo could somehow have Gojo levels of aura in a fight despite literally not ever landing a single attack. I mean, look at this insanely cool panel of Chozo slamming Kenjaku into the ground. It doesn't matter because Kenjaku blocked it, but the point still stands. It's aura. It looks so cool. Actually, the artwork for this entire fight, beginning to end, is definitely some of the best in the whole series. The dynamic perspectives, the emptiness of the environment, the way Chozo be looking like a literal angel, but more on the artwork and choreography later, I guess. The highlight for this entire warm-up fight for me is when Chozo successfully sets up a surprise supernova, which Kenjaku then instinctively instinctively uses his gravity technique to counter. The look on Kenjaku's face when he realized he got successfully rage baited into using gravity is genuinely priceless. Chozo deadass landed 0 hits, but somehow walked away from that fight as the winner, all while being glazed by Yuki, who then stepped in to finish me off. I mean, to finish the fight off. The fight. Overall, I think giving Chozo a more achievable objective was actually a really smart way of making Chozo vs Kenjaku into an actual high-stakes battle, especially since Kenjaku was also held back in preparation for the next fight against Yuki. Speaking of Yuki vs Kenjaku, that's exactly what I'm going to be talking about now, because oh my days, I thought Chozo had aura, but Yuki's aura is just different gravy. Okay, I think the way Kenjaku chooses to describe Yuki is actually just perfect. She's a wild beast that cannot be tamed. When Kenjaku looks at a sorcerer and his cocky smile disappears along with his overconfident attitude, you know he means business, and you know his opponent means business too. I know many of us, myself included, wanted to see more of Yuki in Jujutsu Kaisen, but I'm very grateful that Gege actually kept her shrouded in mystery until this fight, because I don't think the fight would have been as good, and I don't think we would have cared for Yuki as much if that hadn't been the case. I don't know if that actually makes any sense, but hopefully you understand what I'm trying to say. Just as Kenjaku himself points out, her being classified as a special grade sorcerer means that she must be packing something crazy, but her technique is completely shrouded in mystery and she doesn't even function as a conventional sorcerer. Revealing her technique by having her punch Kenjaku so hard it snapped both his arms and sent him flying out of Tengen's weird infinity barrier thing would not have gone so unbelievably hard if we already knew that was coming. Yeah, I know it's not technically an infinity barrier, I just don't really understand how it works. It's called a Sunyata barrier. Oh, Josh, can you just explain it to them?
I really do not care. You pay me to edit the video, not to be in the video. So just read whatever I put on screen. I was not paid enough to care about what this stupid barrier type is.
In fact, I think the only party involved in this fight that actually needed more prior setup was the special grade curse Ganesha that Yuki one-shots in the beginning of the fight with a strong Garuda football. It's an incredible moment, and the look of genuine horror in Kenjaku's face definitely sells how scary Yuki is meant to be, but I feel like it would have meant more to the readers if we knew how strong the curse actually was. Sure, there is a very strong implication that it is an extremely rare and powerful special grade curse from outside of Japan that can remove and affect concepts, but beyond that, it has no feats worth noting other than bullying some American NPCs. If we had seen this curse in action against something genuinely strong, then the moment of Yuki one-shooting it, I've written one-shooting in my scripts, I think I meant one-shotting, but she did fire a football at it. I'm gonna stick with one-shooting, it sounds cooler. The moment of Yuki one-shooting it would have hit so much harder if we had this prior setup. Actually, the panel of Yuki running all the way behind it before its body had even hit the floor is a great example of why I think a lot of Jujutsu Kaisen's fights will translate much better into anime. I think readers tend to accidentally gloss over small details like this and easily forget the panels which don't hold any text. I mentioned this a bit in my Yuta video as well. Pure choreography and combat panels are simply less engaging, so they're forgotten easier. But when we see Yuki speeding round the back of the curse with Kenjaku only realizing right at the last second, people are going to realize just how well structured these fights actually are when they need to be translated into anime. And with how well MAPPA has done for Season 2 and even Season 1, I think people are going to watch these fights and realize just how good the Culling Games really is. Especially this fight, because there is something magical about it. I don't really know how to explain it, but it has some crazy aura that just stands aside from the rest of the fights within this arc. And yes, I do find these moments cool because they are hype and the characters have aura. I also find moments like Kenjaku smiling while majestically healing back his arms very cool because he has crazy aura. I don't understand why so many people in the anime manga community have decided having hype moments and aura is suddenly a bad thing. Like, didn't most of you grow up on Dragon Ball? Actually, you know what, just forget I said that, right? I don't need the smoke with Dragon Ball fans right now. But look, hype moments and aura are there for enjoyment, but they are even better when presented alongside other factors, like how well Kenjaku and Yuki contrast as actual characters because of their similar ideologies about cursed energy, but they also have completely different incentives for what they are doing. Elements like that, and things like themes and character dynamics woven through fights only enhance and push up hype moments and aura to make a good fight overall. It's about having multiple things come together to create a good fight. It's not just about hype moments and aura, but hype moments and aura are actually an important part of making a fight. Does that make sense? I think it makes sense. Chozo's dynamic with Yuki and the entire narrative of how Yuki helped Chozo die as a curse and discover a reason to live as a human is also a very good example of why this entire section of the Culling Games works so well, and that hasn't even got anything to do with hype moments and aura. That's just a really nice character moment for Chozo, which will be very important for the rest of the story. It's kind of just how Chozo is after that point. He is living as a human. Well, living is a stretch, because obviously by the end of the manga he's not, well... Anyway, by presenting these cool dynamics and themes within a fight with hype moments and aura, you basically just get an all-round enhanced experience that would be objectively worse if one of these things was missing. So naturally, when the anime comes out, all of the, positive-minded people are going to go, wow, that's so cool. And all of the crippled, disgusting, basement-dwelling nerds will go, actually, One Piece animation does this. Blah. But we ignore those people because who cares what they think? I guess what I'm trying to say is both. Both is good. Josh, show the both meme.
Both is good.
Yeah, peak fights just have all these things, alright? And Yuki vs Kenjaku is definitely a peak fight for that very reason. It just happens to be that hype moments and aura is the factor that stands at the top of this fight. It's the defining part of this fight, I would say. But that doesn't mean it's the only part. Even Kenjaku using a domain expansion with an open barrier almost immediately within the fight is cool as hell, despite the fact that I still think it's complete BS that the literal best barrier user alive was completely stumped by an open domain. It is one of the flaws of this fight that seems very convenient, but it doesn't ruin the experience for me, because Yuki has one of the highest aura moments in the entire series as a result of being shredded by Kenjaku's gravity sure hit. She is literally left looking like a bowl of spaghetti someone dropped on the floor after tanking that attack, so it's no wonder Kenjaku thought she was dead. Hell, I was almost as shocked as Kenjaku when I saw that Garuda was still alive and functioning, which obviously meant that Yuki wasn't dead. No reason for Kenjaku to panic though, right? Because she will need to take time to heal her mangled body. Oh, no, she's immediately on smoke. Cool. Yeah, Yuki has to be legitimately unstable, just unhinged in the head or a masochist. Because how is your arm looking like a damn Hot Wheels track, but you're smiling like that? Remember, Kenjaku is the king of nonchalant. No matter how desperate things get, he will always keep his cool and think strategically, which is why it hit so monumentally hard when he broke character and straight up scolded Yuki for not healing like he was a disappointed teacher. And her response to Kenjaku here actually just had my legs shaking. She just smiled at Kenjaku and said, hell no. And oh my days, bro, like Gege, you must have been snorting some mythical substance when you wrote this fight, because what the hell? The pages to follow were just filled with insanely good-looking choreography and awesome maneuvers, like when Yuki wrapped Garuda around Kenjaku and basically just used him as a massive weight. For me, I think the biggest fumble in this fight is honestly just the fact Gege hard-nerfed Yuki's output following her injuries. Like, sure, it makes sense to an extent, but why nerf it so much that she's basically just throwing normal punches? It's kind of defeating the point of her even having a curse technique. It wasn't until Big Brother Chozo made his awesome return to the fight that Yuki actually took the time to heal her injuries using reverse curse technique. I also want to point out that Yuki is one of the only sorcerers in the verse to have a special grade curse technique, reverse curse technique, and a domain expansion. But people still have the audacity to say that she's not in the top 10. Like, alright. Kashimo and Yorozu are both easily top 10 sorcerers who are gassed up by the narrator to be these complete monsters, but even they didn't have both of these things. Kenjaku and Yuki are actually just a different level of sorcerer, and no, I do not care where they technically scale, they are both in my top 5. Anyway, it's been a few minutes since we've spoken about Chozo, so let's bring him back into the conversation. The panel of Chozo entering behind a genuinely shocked Kenjaku with his eyes glazed over and body beaten up has to be a top 5 most underrated panel in the entire series. I mean, just look at this cold ass shot of Chozo leaping into the fight with Kenjaku stuck between him and a nearly healed up Yuki. Yeah, it's hype moments and aura, but that's exactly why I love it. Chozo's first order of business is to fire a point-blank piercing blood straight into Kenjaku's face. And when reading this, I low-key thought this would be the end of the fight. I was like, oh my god, Chozo just pulled up to deliver the final blow? That's crazy. But holy chuckle fucks, I was so wrong, because Kenjaku ducked that shit harder than Diddy ducked jail, bro. Kenjaku turned his head into the piercing blood, which caused the removable part of his skull to spin off and let piercing blood slide right past without ever touching his brain. Yeah, like this is Kenjaku's best moment in the entire series. I'm just gonna say it. It's the best. Hands down, no character, not even Gojo or Sukuna, be pulling off stunts like this. It's the best. Cool, yeah, I really thought Yuki and Chozo would win this fight, and then it would be revealed that Kenjaku had a backup body or something, but nah, after seeing this moment, Kenjaku just deserved the win. Like, he earned it fair and square. I know I can be harsh on Kenjaku sometimes, but I'm just gonna say it how it is. He absolutely ran the final stretch of this fight. Like, god damn. Bro was burnt out of his technique, stuck in between a special grade sorcerer and a curse womb death painting, getting absolutely walloped. Like he could not catch a break, and yet he was still smiling and still finding opportunities to aura farm on them. Once his technique replenished though, that was it, they didn't stand a chance. Kenjaku slamming Chozo and Garuda into the ground with a strong gravity really made it feel as if the fight was over. Like this is when I started to realize that Kenjaku could just actually kill them and take Tengen. What sealed the deal for me though was when Kenjaku whipped out minimum Uzumaki. You see, I did not think her spirit manipulation was that cool until I saw how Kenjaku was using it in this fight. And I also love simple Sero-style laser beam attacks in anime, so mini Uzumaki was exactly what I wanted to see in order to finally make Curse Spirit manipulation a technique worth respecting. Yuki actually tanks the first blast after being baited in, but the second tears straight through her stomach before Kenjaku then finishes her off by tearing her in half with a strong gravity. Wow, like Kenjaku really is just an absolute monster. This dude really won a fight against these two while they had help from the best barrier user ever. How much more badass can you get? Again, my biggest complaint about the entire fight is that after being hit by Kenjaku's domain, Yuki went from being able to tear straight through Kenjaku's defenses like butter to not doing a single bit of visible damage when landing punches directly on Kenjaku's face. Like sure, RCT weakened her output, but lowering Star Rage's effectiveness that much felt very, very convenient, and it really is the only part of the fight that slightly breaks my immersion. And I know what you're thinking, right? How come that breaks my immersion, but not the bit where Yuki is shown to somehow still be alive even when ripped in half, and then turns herself into a literal black hole, which definitely should have deleted Kenjaku from existence. I'll tell you why I don't consider that an issue. It's because it's cool. Plain and simple. I can agree that it makes absolutely no sense for Kenjaku to be able to react to it, and somehow actually even counter the black hole with gravity. It doesn't make any sense at all. I don't understand it, but it was cool. I would rather it did happen than not happen. It really is as simple as that. Whereas in the case for Yuki, we're taking away something cool for the sake of making the fight make sense. I would rather keep the cool stuff and then have the fight be a little bit ambiguous in some places. Is ambiguous the right word? I feel like it is. I don't know, it just sounded smart. But yeah, the only people who genuinely don't like this black hole moment are power scalers, and who even cares what they think. The only mystery that matters here is how the hell Kenjaku's shirt was ripped off but his pants conveniently stayed on. That's literally the only mystery that I care about in this. Well, not that I wanted to see. Never mind. After having recorded most of this video, I'm kind of realizing it is mostly just me gassing up the hype moments and aura instead of overanalyzing the themes and narrative like I normally do. But honestly, I'm kind of okay with it this time round because I do think this fight's primary strength is having hype moments and aura. Sure, Chozo has some incredible character moments and has an awesome dynamic with Yuki, especially the moment where she tells him to live as a human right before her death. But honestly, besides that, this fight's primary strength is just being completely awesome. So yeah, I think the overall point of this video for me is that despite having flaws and not being as narratively deep as the Culling Games fights that came before it, Yuki and Chozo vs Kenjaku was so stupidly cool and hype that it still managed to be a top 3 fight for me. And to be honest, I had a very hard time putting that into words and actually scripting this video, which is why a lot of it is improvised, because I do kind of find it contradictory in nature. Like I am sat here saying it has more flaws than other fights, but I prefer it to other fights, which is a hard thing to actually communicate to people. I just think the fight's very cool. I don't know, I was hooked. It really is as simple as that, and I know I'm not the only one either. But sometimes I think that is okay. I think it's okay to not look too far into things and just let yourself enjoy stuff every once in a while. And Gege should get a lot of the credit as well. Like he does have a talent for just creating awesome fights regardless of how many flaws there are in the story. Actually, I think one of the main reasons I love the fight so much is because it is one of the few fights that has genuinely high stakes. This is the first time you read a fight in the Culling Games without knowing who's going to walk away victorious. Yuji, Megumi, Yuta, Hakari, and Maki all have a degree of plot armor in their Culling Game fights, because when you start reading, you just know that they're going to walk away. That's the point of the arc. They go in, face their challenges, and they walk out victorious. When it came to Yuki vs Kenjaku though, you genuinely aren't so sure. It could go so many ways because everyone is just a wild card. I do feel like I'm rambling again, so I'm gonna end the video here, but you get the point, right? I just really like it because it's cool. Maybe this video hasn't explained it very well, but when the anime drops, I have a feeling you'll understand exactly what it is I'm trying to say, because I have my stocks in Yuki vs Kenjaku being the best fight of Season 3, perhaps even better than Yuta vs Sendai Colony. Anyway, as always, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in a bit.